Hey, everybody, welcome. Glad to be here with all of you tonight. Hope you're having a great night. And yeah, we're going to do our usual thing, usual late night conversations. Let's do it.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everyone. So glad to be here with all of you tonight. We're having yet another great late night conversation. The way we do things here, first I give my opening remarks, which is then followed by the roll call where I call you all out as I see you, names and locations. And then from there, I answer your questions for the remainder of the night. So if there's something that you would like me to address in the second half of the program, the best way to do that would be to send me a Rumble rant if you're watching on Rumble, or send me a Cash App to Caleb Maupin at Cash App 22 if you're watching on YouTube or you just want to send it that way. I accept Cash Apps, Caleb Maupin 22, and I also accept Rumble rants on the Rumble. Right now, YouTube will not let us remonetize. It's really annoying. I was tweeting at them, and they, even though we've never had a strike, we had one warning about me talking about the Houthis, which wasn't a violation of their rules. Regardless, they will not let us remonetize, which is really, really annoying. Regardless, we're still going, right? We're going to fight to be on this platform as long as we can be on here, right? Have access to an audience. So, yeah, if you would like to send a question for the second half of the show, Rumble rants on the Rumble, or Caleb Maupin 22 on Cash App. Now, our big announcement is coming up July 12th. We're having our national convention in Chicago. It will be the biggest event that CPI has ever done by far. Every day I've got a checklist of things to take care of. Shout out to everyone who's working so hard to make this event happen around the country. A lot of people are putting a lot of effort into this event, and I'm very happy that they're doing that. I'm very appreciative of what everyone is doing. Yeah, be there. July 12th, Midwest Conference Center in 401 Lake Street, North Lake, Illinois. It's going to be really, really amazing. It's going to be really tremendous, and I really hope that you will join us. And if you can't join us, you can always donate. There's a donation link. We've raised quite a bit of money to have the event, but the expenses keep coming in. But we got a very generous contribution today. Shout out to the person who gave that very generous contribution. It's deeply appreciated. But more is always helpful. We want to stay ahead, right? You always want to stay ahead of the game. So yeah, register if you're coming so that we know you're coming. And that is coming up. So again, the way we do things on this channel is that we do opening remarks first, where I talk about whatever it is I'm going to talk about. Then from there, we do a roll call. And then after that, I answer your questions. So send me a question for the second half of the program. Questions make the second half of the program fun. I answer them off the cuff, off the top of my head. So, So send a question, Rumble rant, if you're on the Rumble, or Cash App me, Caleb Maupin 22, to get your questions answered in the second half of our show. Now, I was thinking about what I might talk about tonight, and I realized that there's a lot wrapped up in the recent victory of Zohran Mamdani in the New York City Democrat primary, right? This guy is a Shia Muslim, born in Uganda, calls himself a socialist. He's now the Democrat nominee for mayor of New York City. The right wing is going wild. The Bernie Sanders crew is ecstatic, and those of us who are anti-imperialist are going, we're all kind of confused, right? And I did a whole stream about New York City politics and what this means in the context of New York City politics, what factions he's aligned with, who's really mad at him, that certainly is happening, right? So then I also realized by looking into the life of Zohran Mamdani, there's a lot we can talk about the history of the communist movement, the history of social democracy, the history of anti-imperialism, and where he came from politically and biologically, I guess. We're going to talk about his parents a little bit. But then I also realized that we can also talk about some of the confusion about what socialism means, and why CPI, we no longer call ourselves socialists and communists, because it's gotten so messy and confusing, and why what we're doing is very different than what socialists and communists are doing. And, there's a whole lot we can talk about just by talking about Mamdani, which is really neat. I mean, it's good when there's a current event that gives you an opportunity to talk about important stuff, to really educate about important issues. So we're going to do that. So I thought we'd start out. We'll just, I will show his CNN interview and we will go through it. And this isn't a debunk, right? That's one thing, there's what they call reaction streaming, which I've done a fair amount of, where you show somebody, then you stop it and you go, well, that's wrong, blah, 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 blah. I don't want to do that. All right. It's not helpful for me to just go, that's wrong, because who cares? Who cares if it's wrong, right? This guy is the Democratic Party's nominee for mayor of New York City. He can be wrong all day long and I can be right, but that doesn't fucking matter now, does it? Right? We're going to talk about why he's saying what he's saying, who he represents, and we're going to talk about what his words mean and why he's saying them. And we're not going to look at this from the front, this is a common mistake that is made, right? It's kind of a simplistic analysis of, I've talked about kindergarten communism before, where, in kindergarten, you learn your colors. That is red, that is blue, that is purple, that is green. You learn your numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 1,000, right? When I was in kindergarten, I think that for a while, like one kid in the class said 1,000 billion trillion. And we all thought that was really cool. So we all started saying 1,000 billion trillion. Our teacher had to explain to us there's no such number as 1,000 billion trillion. Those are different numbers. There is 1,000, there is a billion, there is a trillion, but there's not a number called 1,000 billion trillion. When you're in kindergarten, you learn that this is an apple, this is an orange, etc. Well, the problem is that we're doing some like complex stuff, and if we were to just point at Mamdani and say that is not what we are, that would accomplish nothing. Because if we're going to accomplish our project of building an anti-monopoly coalition, of fighting for a government of action that fights for working families, opposing globalism, imperialism, getting the United States to join the new economy, we're going to accomplish that. We have to know who these other forces are, who they represent, what are the divisions in the ruling class and all that. And if we just point at people and say, that's not us, that's not helpful. And that is where, this is why social media gets on my nerves. I try not to spend too much time on Twitter these days, because there are a lot of kindergarten communists out there who think they're smarter than you because they can do that, right? And because we don't do that, because we're talking about some advanced mathematics here, we're not just learning our numbers and colors. They feel like they're smarter because they know, they can point at this and say, this is not a communist. This is, and it's obviously way more complicated than that. Right. And, It's way, way more complicated than that. I mean, if you look at the history of various anti-imperialist revolutions in China, they had a block of 4 great classes, right? And I mean, clearly Mao was an idiot because everybody knows communism is only for the working class. Duh. And you're against the capitalists. But what does the Chinese flag have on it? It has 4 stars surrounded by a big star. And one of those stars is for the national bourgeoisie. Another one of the stars is for the urban merchants. Another one of the stars is for the peasantry. And only one of the stars is for the working class. I guess Mao clearly didn't know anything. It's the working class versus the capitalists. Duh. I mean, that's the kindergarten communism approach. Well, Mao was not in kindergarten, right? Mao was doing some advanced stuff, and he built a united front, and his movement, the Communist Party of China, has taken China from being one of the poorest countries in the world to being the second largest economy on earth and lifted millions of people out of poverty. And they did it by having a deep understanding of the forces at play and building a united front and understanding the economy, et cetera, right? And that's what we're striving to do. We're not striving to just point at things and say, that's a capitalist, that's a worker. And we're also not, trying to just alienate people by saying, well, you're wrong, right? We're trying to actually understand the forces at play. Now, honestly, I mean, I want this Zohran guy to do well. If he wins, I hope he takes office and takes New York City in an anti-imperialist direction. I think it's very unlikely he will be allowed to take office. And I also think it's very, very unlikely that if he did take office, he would make New York City anti-imperialist. And I hate to say that, but I will give him a chance. And that is my policy. I gave AOC a chance. I gave Donald Trump a chance. I will give him a chance. I even gave Biden a chance. Biden's first joint address to Congress, his State of the Union that wasn't a State of the Union, was very good. He just didn't do any of it. It was all said all kinds of things I agreed with. He just did not do any of them. We're going to take a look first at what Mamdani said on his CNN interview. And we're going to look at it from the perspective of where's this coming from, et cetera. And then we're going to talk about a lot of different things. We're going to talk about his background, et cetera. Let's just start the CNN piece and we'll just kind of riff off the CNN piece, and we'll go from there. So this was his CNN interview on CNN.
Big battle. New York, who, of course, drop out of the race before tomorrow's deadline. So now this raises crucial questions about whether he will also be running in the general election as an independent. But Mamdani's likely and seismic win over Cuomo in the primary is generating national headlines about him being a new political star, creating a movement. And from the left-leaning Nation magazine, they write the Democratic Party establishment should follow Zohran Mamdani's example. Out front now, New York State Assemblyman and presumptive Democratic nominee for mayor of New York, Zohran Mamdani. And so much appreciate your time. A whirlwind week for you, I think, to put it lightly. Okay, so, everyone else is putting their view on this, of what this means, okay? Your victory. What do you think it means?
I think it means that we are ready in the most expensive city in the United States to have 5 boroughs that New Yorkers can actually afford. And this entire race was about the question of affordability. And ultimately...
So right there, that fits my thesis. He is talking about the wealthy real estate owners that are tied to Israel, that are pro-Netanyahu, that are Likud party affiliated, that are aligned with Donald Trump. He's talking about the fact that there are a lot of lower level capitalists who own land in New York City, who own big apartment buildings, and nobody has to live in them. And they're just making money. It's like gambling. They're making money off of real estate speculation. They wait for the market to change and they sell the property. And that's why the rent keeps going up in New York City, is because housing has been turned into a gambling casino. It's turned into a new stock market, and there's a lot of real estate speculators. And Donald Trump, that's what he comes out of. Donald Trump was very key in creating that state of affairs. He was a big real estate guy in the 80s. And I have maintained that one reason that Mamdani has been allowed to rise is as an FU to the Trump layer of kind of wealthy people, millionaires that are not part of the club in New York City, that are wealthy real estate owners, that are hardcore supporters of Likud, hardcore right-wing Zionists and big supporters of Trump, that hate communism and hate Muslims, and just this guy's existence terrifies them. And, that's what he said. He wants New York City, all 5 boroughs, to be affordable. Manhattan is definitely not affordable. Most of Brooklyn is not affordable. And so, that fits my thesis about what he's getting at, that this campaign is this is different layers of New York City giving the middle finger to a certain layer of Trumpist, right-wing Zionist real estate interests.
I have run a campaign that speaks about the tools that city government actually has to deliver that affordability in the wealthiest city in the wealthiest country in the world. And it's time that we have a mayoral administration that follows through and actually delivers that.
All right, so I want to talk about some of that, but first, the breaking news. Isaac DeVere is reporting that Andrew Cuomo is not dropping out of the general election race, right? And it's kind of a willy-wonny, but the deadline's tomorrow. Is this a surprise to you?
Ultimately, Andrew's decision or my decision matters less than the decision that voters already took on Tuesday night, where we won from Bay Ridge to Dyker Heights to Harlem to Washington Heights. We saw a mandate delivered for a new generation of leadership. And I am so proud and excited to continue to build on that mandate with an ever-expanding coalition, one that has now included the endorsements of Congressman Jerry Nadler.
Now, you'll notice, by the way, all of that is Barack Obama. Right. And this is, again, part of what makes me a little bit suspicious. None of what he just said there is at all radical sounding. That's Barack Obama. I'm bringing together a new coalition, new leadership in the country, from one part of the city to another. This is all Barack Obama speak. That could have been written by the exact same speechwriters that wrote for Barack Obama in 2008. And it has absolutely no content, political content. We're coming together, united we stand, right? It's just that was just pure Democratic Party, Barack Obama, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden gobbledygook. I'm bringing the people together forward, and forward we're bringing people together, and all Americans are. He could have answered that question in a way that he actually said something. He did not. He gave us an Obama word salad, and that kind of thing. He just sounds like a regular Democrat. But let's continue.
State Senator Brad Hoylman Siegel and Manhattan Borough President, soon-to-be Controller, Mark Levine. And ultimately, that is a coalition that will continue to expand through November.
Right. So you're saying no matter what, if Andrew Cuomo's in, it's not like a redo where you're worried?
No, not at all. We did it once, and it turned out pretty well.
All right. So now, can we talk about the policy? The policy is what stood out to a lot of people. But I said the freezing rents on half of the apartments, free bus service, the free childcare, and the city-run grocery stores.
All of that's good. I'm not against any of that. Right? Think about it. Right? Freeze the rent on half the apartments in New York City. That would be great. Right? New York City apartments, the rent goes up, and that's how this real estate speculation bullshit is able to keep going on. So if you froze the rent on half the apartments in the city, that would be, well, I guess, number one, it'd be a giant FU to the Zionist real estate conglomerates. And it would also be really good for working class New Yorkers. I'm for that. Free bus service. What's wrong with that, right? The fact that we have to pay to get on the bus when, buses, why not, right? The MTA, a lot of people think, this is a really common thing. A lot of people think that public transportation in New York City is actually public. It is not. It is a private company that with a state monopoly. The MTA makes a profit, right? It's called a beneficent corporation. It's basically set up by the banks, and there are banks that make profit that make profit off of the subways, off of the buses, and it's a giant ripoff. The taxpayers basically facilitate it. And then these banks make profits from it. The subways of New York City used to be public, like actually public property, actually nationalized. That was gotten rid of in the 1970s. Public transportation is a complete ripoff in New York City, and it's awful. It's horrible. It's the best in the country, but it's very bad compared to any other city. But it's just, the subways smell like urine. The trains are delayed. It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. It's run for profit, but it's not competitive, right? Certain corporations have a contract, right? Libertarians would say, well, it's not really capitalist because the government facilitates it. They're kind of right. But it's not nationalized either. It's not like, nationalized. It's privately owned and set up to maximize profits for owners at the taxpayer's expense. It's one of those crony capitalist kind of situations where the public gets shitty service and banks make money. And there you go. And if you see the subways they have in any other country, right? You go to Moscow, the subways are amazing. They have Wi-Fi. They don't smell like urine. They're beautifully decorated. I can show you the videos of the subways in Moscow. I mean, it's amazing. Pyongyang, North Korea, is a country that's under lockdown, has almost no money, and they still have subways that are amazing compared to New York City subways. So, great, right? Free childcare for kids under 5. Again, what could be wrong with that? It's already subsidized a little bit in New York City, which is good, but yeah, make it free. And city-run grocery stores. Now, that's interesting. Now, what would that be? That would be city-run grocery stores that would like compete and like set standards, right? It'd be like a public option for grocery stores, right? So that, they would have the healthy food and, it's an interesting idea, right? I'm not against it. Why not, right? And that would provide jobs. People would get hired in the city-run grocery stores, and because they're publicly owned, they would be unionized. All that, all those 4 things all sound great. I can't think of anything wrong with any of those 4 things. I like them, right? Free bus service, freeze the rent, free childcare for kids under 5, and city-run grocery stores. I'm for that. So, there you go.
How do you pay for that?
Let's go through it. So for the first thing, freezing the rent, that's not something that requires any fiscal output from the city. It's something that's determined by the Rent Guidelines Board, composed of 9 members. The mayor picks each of those members. They determine each year whether rents rise or whether they stay the same.
That could be done immediately, right? That's just a policy, right? Every year, the rent board decides how much the rent can go up, right? And for rent-controlled apartments, it goes up by 1%, and for not rent-controlled, yeah, I mean, so he's right. That does not require any spending. And there you go.
Previous mayoral administration froze the rent 3 times. So this has clear historical precedent. When it comes to city-run grocery...
Even Adams. You're saying Adams.
No, this is prior.
Okay, prior.
Adams. He's the current one who has raised it 9% on those same New Yorkers, pushing them out of their homes. City-run grocery stores, I proposed a pilot program of 1 store in each borough. These are 5 stores in total. The total cost of this is $60 million. This is less than half the cost of what the city is already set to spend on a subsidy program for corporate supermarkets that has no guarantee of cheaper prices or collective bargaining agreements or even accepting
So
SNAP
you're not
or WIC.
looking at some like Soviet Union grocery stores on every corner that are going to be
What is a Soviet Union grocery store on every corner? I thought the Soviet Union, I was always told that they didn't have grocery stores and they had to wait in line for hours for bread. Like, what the hell is she talking about? Soviet Union grocery store. What is a Soviet Union grocery store? I want to go to a Soviet Union grocery store, right? Is that like everyone wears Ushankas or something? I mean, that's just like, and we're going to talk about this later. It's like, sometimes I get frustrated with the left, but, anti-communism, the old Cold War American anti-communism is so dumb that, I mean, it's like, it almost makes you, you almost have to be a communist because it's so stupid. But anyway, yeah, Soviet Union grocery stores on every corner. He doesn't want that. Oh, thank God, right? I mean, what is a Soviet Union grocery store? What the only fruits they have are beets because it's Soviet Union groceries, right? I mean, they have loads of oranges and especially go down to Georgia and anyway, whatever.
government.
No, what I'm looking at is how to solve the very clear twin crises of affordability when you go to the grocery store and food deserts, which disproportionately impact Black and brown New Yorkers across the 5 boroughs, where I've heard directly from New Yorkers who say, why is it that I can find 6 fast food restaurants in a 5-block radius, but I can't find a place to buy groceries?
But five boroughs, 5 grocery stores, but that can't be the goal.
Well, I mean, the idea
is the goal you want them on every. No. But in New York, things do go. There's a nail salon on every corner. There's a grocery store on almost every other corner.
I think ultimately I'm guided by outcomes. If this pilot succeeds in guaranteeing cheaper groceries, as I think it will be, then yes, it should scale up. If it doesn't succeed, then no, it shouldn't, because what New Yorkers want are results. And then it comes to making buses free and universal childcare.
Right.
These are things that cost around $700 million and let's say about $5 or $6 billion. Significant amounts of money.
Huge amounts of money.
But have to be understood in the context of a $113 billion municipal budget, a $252 billion state budget, and we put forward a plan to pay for these and more to start Trump-proofing our city through 2 major revenue streams. Increasing the top corporate tax rate of New York to match that of New Jersey, that raises $5 billion, and increasing income taxes on the top 1% of New Yorkers who make $1 million or more a year by 2%. Both of these things, after they come to fruition, You're still paying less than you did before Trump.
Okay. On the city tax, though, and I know that takes effect with people right now, that top rate of people of 50,000 or more. So if you're going to be adding 2% to people at $1 million, that I just did the math, right? Well, but that's going to be an increase of 51% of what they pay now. I'm not saying cry for them. I'm saying if they leave, you're not going to get that money. And when you increase someone's taxes by 51%, aren't a lot of people going to leave?
We're saying we're increasing.
Well, they already kind of left because of the pandemic, I mean, New York City used to be a lot more fun, right? It used to be they were kind of turning New York City into a playground for rich kids. They're not doing that no more. And in fact, now, since the pandemic, there's a lot of boarded up stores. And I mean, the rich people are not here anymore. And it used to be rich people came here to go shopping at fancy stores. Now rich people order their crap on the internet at fancy stores on the internet. I mean, it's like they're already gone, kind of. That's the problem that we've got in New York City. The pandemic kind of, really, there's still, nightlife and bars and stuff like that. And there's still plenty of rich people that are here. And there's a lot of rich people who maintain an apartment here and in like 5 other cities or whatever. That's really common among like ultra rich people. And I don't think they're going to give up that one apartment. They probably maintain their residence in another state or something. So I don't know. I don't think she's really right that they're all just going to leave the city. They've already left and whatever. Again, I'm trying to give this guy the benefit of the doubt. I don't want to completely, I'm not here to tell you why he's wrong. I think he is. And I don't think he's going to be able to really, I don't think he's he's certainly not an anti-imperialist. And I'll tell you more about that later, but okay, whatever. Next.
Increasing it by 2% of what it is right now. And ultimately, I'm guided by the facts. The Fiscal Policy Institute did an analysis of the top 1% of New Yorkers and found that they leave the city at 1/4 the rate of other income categories. And when they do leave, they leave to what are called high tax states, New Jersey, California. So what it then comes down to is, why are they leaving? Is it fiscal policy or is it actually quality of life? And I've heard that time and again from wealthier New Yorkers, from all New Yorkers.
So it's talk. They're going to go to Florida and all you think is talk.
In 2021, when I came to the state assembly, we had the same fight to fund public schools, to raise taxes on billionaires and corporations. We were told millionaires would flee.
Yep.
And we now have more millionaires.
Okay.
Now, let me just throw this out there. There are a lot of people who said that they're going to leave New York City if this guy becomes mayor, but it's not because of taxes. It's because he's a Muslim. And it's because he calls himself a socialist, right? There's a lot of people that are saying, I'm going to leave New York City because I can't stand to live with an evil. It's not about the policies he would implement. It's about his identity. It's that he's a socialist, calls himself that at least, that he is a Muslim, that he's opposed to Israel. I guess he says he agrees with Israel's quote unquote right to exist. He just, he wouldn't visit Israel, and he strongly opposes Israel's policies. He was the only candidate on the debate stage who said he wouldn't visit Israel, when he got elected. If he won, he wouldn't go and visit Israel. And, that created a big stir. So, there's a lot of people that say they will leave the city, but I don't think it's because of, their taxes going up by 2% or even 10%. I think it's because they don't like him and his identity, right? And again, this is how American politics is becoming on the blue team and the red team, right? Again, the red team doesn't give a shit about what this guy actually stands for and will do. They hate the word socialist. They hate Muslims. They are pro-Israel. That said, the blue team, a lot of the woke people on the blue team don't give a shit about what this guy actually says. They just love Muslims, and they don't like Israel, and they love the word socialist, and they want to stick it to the old racist white men or whatever. So this is a big problem in American politics. Part of what CPI is trying to overcome. I don't want people to join CPI because they like my race or they like my ethnicity. I want people to actually talk about policy. And that's the problem. Policy is important. This guy's articulated some decent policy so far. So I'll give him that. And I'm telling you, kind of, again, I am framing Zohran's campaign as this is kind of the establishment of New York City and the country to some degree or other, punishing the Zionist real estate faction that is aligned with Donald Trump. That's what I'm arguing here. So far, this all lines up. So here we go.
Times is saying that Mayor Adams is trying to gather business leaders to support him, to say this is going to be bad. And Bill Ackman, billionaire hedge fund manager, of course, you know of him, New Yorker, he said he agrees with you that the city's broken, okay, but he has a real problem with your economic policies. He said the ability for New York City to offer services for the poor and needy, let alone the average New Yorker, is entirely dependent on New York City being a business-friendly environment and a place where wealthy residents are willing to spend 183 days, the amount you need to be taxed, and assume the associated tax burden. Unfortunately, both have already started making arrangements for the exits. So you just think that that isn't going to add up. And by the way, that corporate tax rate that you're talking about, that's a big increase.
That's matching 7.25% going to 11.5%. And the point of it is that if it works for our regional neighbor, why can't it work for us? And with Bill Ackman, this is someone who put $500,000 into Andrew Cuomo's super PAC, someone to whom clearly money is not an issue. And ultimately, even for him, life would get better. Because what I'm looking to use this money for is to make the quality of life across the city better.
Okay, so when people say democratic socialist, right? And I'm curious what you think this means. I mean, do you like capitalism?
No, I have many critiques of capitalism. And I think ultimately the definition for me of why I call myself a democratic socialist is the words of Dr. King decades ago. He said, call it democracy or call it democratic socialism. There must be a better distribution of wealth for all of God's children in this country. And that's what I'm focused on, is dignity and taking on income inequality. And for too long, politicians have pretended that we're spectators to that crisis of affordability. We're actually actors, and we have the choice to exacerbate it, like Mayor Adams has.
That is like nails on a chalkboard to me. And I'll tell you why, right? And, you know, not his concern, and we'll get into that in a second. I have spent my entire life explaining to people that socialism is not about redistribution of wealth. And Karl Marx wrote an entire pamphlet explaining that socialism is not about redistribution of wealth. It's called The Critique of the Goethe Program. Redistribution of wealth is not socialism. It's called taxation. And it goes on under every system that has ever existed. But part of the way American working people have been poisoned on the idea of socialism is that everybody hates paying their taxes. And the right wing has convinced Americans, the right wing, narrative is that paying your taxes is socialism, right? And that this narrative, it has absolutely nothing to do with anything that Marx ever wrote. It has absolutely nothing to do with what any government that calls itself communist has ever done, but it's what we're all taught. I was taught in school that communism is where everyone gets paid the exact same wage, no matter how hard they work. Where did this lie that I was taught come from? The Soviet Union, there was all kinds of different wages. China, North Korea, every communist government that's ever existed, there's been all kinds of income inequality, right? I have spent my whole life explaining to people that, no, I don't want everyone to get paid the exact same wage, no matter how hard they work. No, I don't want redistribution of wealth, right? There will be redistribution of wealth, just like there is now. But that's not what I'm fighting for. And I've spent my entire life explaining that to people. Look, and it's like, I don't know where people get this, but there's so much of this, right? Margaret Thatcher says, communism doesn't work because eventually you run out of other people's money. Wow. It's funny, the Soviet Union was a poor, agrarian, non-industrialized country. And I guess Stalin just took money that was already there and moved it around, and then he ran out and it was all over. If all that China had done was redistribute other people's money, redistribute wealth that was already there, China would still be the sick man of Asia. It'd still be deeply poor. If all that the Soviet Union under Stalin had done was redistribute wealth, was take wealth that was already there and move it around, then the Soviet Union would never have turned into an industrial superpower and defeated the Nazis. If all that Gaddafi, the Islamic socialist leader, the great African leader, if all he'd ever done was redistribute wealth that was already there, Libya would not have had the highest life expectancy on the African continent. It's like, this has absolutely nothing to do with capitalism versus socialism. Every capitalist society that has ever existed has redistributed wealth. It's a real quote from Dr. Martin Luther King. That's true. Dr. Martin Luther King did say that, but this is like nails on the chalkboard to me, because the reason that it's nails on the chalkboard to me is because I have explained over and over and over again to hardworking people who say, how can you possibly believe in socialism? I've had to explain to them, because hardworking people have said, look, Caleb, I have worked my ass off my whole life for low pay and saved up to buy a nice house. I have worked my butt off to get a decent car to drive my kids around in. And socialism wants to take my wealth, my car, my house that I worked really, really hard for shit wages to get, and redistribute it to some lazy poor person who hasn't worked. I don't want that. And do you blame them? I wouldn't want that either. If I spent, 40 years in a steel mill, saving my money so I could get a car, saving my money so I could have a nice house to raise my kids in, saving money to get my kids a college education. And I thought that what socialism was the government increasing my tax rate to take my house and car away. I would be opposed to that. And why does it never occur to people like Zohran that that's people's major objection? It's like, it's like, have they ever been outside of New York City? Have they ever walked through suburbia? Have they ever talked to anybody? Like, when you argue socialism and capitalism, the primary objection that working class Americans and small business Americans have is, you want to take my wealth away. And I have had to work my butt off, and I've gotten exploited, and I've suffered to get this little bit of wealth, this little bit of property that I have. And you want to take it away from me. And that, when you say redistribution of wealth, that's what people hear. And they're right to object to that. That's why this phrase redistribution of wealth has to be gotten rid of. Because every society in history redistributes wealth, and working people who have to work really, really hard to get the wealth that they have don't want their wealth to be redistributed. They don't, right? And it is just nails on a chalkboard. I'm giving him his due, and I've been praising him for the past 30 minutes. But on this issue, I just have to say that, I know this is how his crowd talks about it. This is how the AOC crowd and the Bernie crowd talk about it. And it drives me up the wall, because I've spent years trying to tell people, no, when he says income inequality, right? What do most people hear? They hear everyone gets paid the same wage, got to make the income equal. That is not what we are for. That is not socialism. No communist or socialist government in the world has given everyone the same wage. And it's like they have no interest in debunking or refuting the negative things people believe, right? And I don't get it. And when it really gets down to it, right? I mean, we'll get into this later, but when it really gets down to it, right? And I hate to be a negative Nancy here. When it really gets down to it, though, the reason they have no concern about overcoming that objection is because they don't exist. They don't exist to recruit the bulk of the American people, right? They exist. They work for the ultra rich, right? The wealthy, the big banks and the big monopolies and the liberal establishment of the United States. And they're there to kick around the lower level capitalists who won't accept degrowth, right? And that's really the purpose that AOC and Bernie and all of them serve, right? Their job, they're not trying to restructure the economy so that we can have growth and the banks, factories, and industries operate rationally so we have growth. They're not trying to do that. They're there to kick Joe the bar owner in the face and tell him, you better accept lockdowns. You better accept higher taxes. We got to stop. We got to have degrowth to stabilize capitalism, right? And that's why they're obsessed with the climate change issue. And that's why degrowth is really popular among all of them, is that the socialist current that we have, the Rockefeller socialists, if you want to call it that, that's what they're there to do. Now, that's not to say there aren't people who have joined them strategically and tried to push something else. But at the end of the day, that's what they're there to do. Now, in this case, it's a little bit more nuanced because in New York City, those lower level capitalists that, they certainly deserve a punch in the face, and they certainly deserve to get kicked around because they're fanatical supporters of right-wing Likudnik Zionism. And they hate Muslims, and they're cheering for, the murder of Palestinians. And, and I mean, in New York City, those folks play a particularly bad role, but nationally, that's not always true. And nationally, a lot of lower level capitalists are pro-growth. And so it's complicated. And a lot of lower level capitalists want to trade more with Russia and China, and it's complicated. And so in this case, right, the people that he's basically been boosted to kick around are the right-wing Zionists of New York City, who are real estate owners, who are pro-Trump, and, good for him. I have no objection to kicking those folks around. And again, he's kind of a, what do you call it? Kind of a mascot. He doesn't have to say anything. He doesn't have to do anything. Just his existence. Calls himself a socialist, is a Muslim. He's brown. They just hold his face there. Oh my God, we can't have that. And those folks deserve to be spooked. Those folks deserve to be, terrified of this guy. I have no problem with, the liberal Rockefeller establishment propping up this guy to punish and traumatize the lower level of right-wing Zionist real estate conglomerates. I have no problem with that. So far, someone's mad at me in the chat saying I'm bashing him. I'm not bashing him, right? I mean, so far, I approve. I approve of what I've seen so far. I don't agree with the redistribution of wealth rhetoric, but that's because I'm not him. I serve a different purpose. But but so far, I'm putting my stamp of approval on most of what I've seen so far, except I don't agree about the redistribution of wealth. So there we go.
Or to respond to it and resolve it like I'm planning to do.
Okay. So, for people who say that America was built on, and a lot of immigrants, and obviously you speak from an immigrant experience. I mean, you came as a young child, but you speak to a lot of people who came much more recently, that they come to America because they believe in capitalism. They believe that if they work hard and make a lot of money, that's part of the American dream. Do you think that's not part of the American dream?
I think the dream at its core is a dream for stability in one's life. And what you're saying, that you work hard enough and that you then reap the benefits, too many New Yorkers, and Americans for that matter, are working 8 hours and then still feeling like they haven't made enough money to keep living in the city they call home. And ultimately, what I'm focused on...
This is okay. I mean... he's not wrong. This is... but again, why didn't he see that objection coming? And again, why is he not appealing to people's desire to work out hard and build, and he's just kind of,
is making the city affordable for everyone, not to win an ideological argument, but to deliver on the mandate of this campaign.
So when Mayor Adams, you just heard him come out and he said, soup, silver spoon. He talked about manicured nails to refer to you, right? I was looking at him. You can show him to everybody. What do you say to him?
I understand what he's doing. He's trying to distract from his own record. His is a record where he raised rents on more than 2 million New Yorkers by 9%, and he's considering another 8% increase. His is a record of raising the water bill to the highest it's been in 13 years, supporting Con Edison when they wanted to increase New Yorkers' gas and electric bills by $65 a month. I would much rather talk about me than I would about his record if I was him. And so that's what he's going to be doing over the next few months. And we will continue to remind New Yorkers what's on the ballot. It's affordability.
I just want to play, because that's what this is, play more of Mamdani telling his story.
So to quote the words of a famous New Yorker, allow me to reintroduce myself. I was born in Kampala, Uganda, in East Africa. I was given my middle name Kwame by my father, who named me after the first prime minister of Ghana.
I moved to this city when I was 7. This is the city I fell in love with, the city where I got my citizenship.
He's been in the New York Assembly for 4 years. And before that, he was an aspiring rapper under the name Mr. Cardamom. Listen. Once you do it, it's out there. It never comes back. It's there.
Didn't think it was going to be on CNN.
It's there.
Now, so this is all very interesting. So, I guess we'll use this to be to get into the guy's history. So his father is of Indian descent, but was a Muslim and lived in Uganda. His mother is of Indian descent and is a filmmaker. He was born in Uganda, and his middle name is Kwame, after Kwame Nkrumah, the African socialist leader. And he was born in Uganda, and his father is an activist. I guess his father studied in the United States and got involved in, as an African of Indian descent, got involved in civil rights activism when he was studying here. And the FBI visited his father and was worried that he was a communist because he was a foreign guy who was involved in civil rights protests. And back then, the FBI was very obsessed with foreign influence. Does that sound familiar? But that was true, right? The reason the program the FBI formed to go after civil rights activists was what they called the COINTELPRO program, because J. Edgar Hoover believed the civil rights movement was a foreign conspiracy, and believed it was a foreign plot. And it was intelligence, because the word civil rights came from the Communist Party. The Communist Party formed the Civil Rights Congress to defend African Americans who were charged with crimes in the Southern Jim Crow courts. And the word civil rights was a communist buzzword. And before Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the civil rights movement, the only people that were white and were advocating for equality for Black people were communists largely. So because of that, when they had a foreign guy, a guy from Africa, right, from Uganda, a brown guy was marching in civil rights protests, the FBI showed up at his house and they said, "Are you a communist?" And that's apparently what got his father interested in communism. His father was in Uganda, and his father was very opposed to Idi Amin. Now, Idi Amin was the military dictator of Uganda, and Idi Amin, was a mixed figure, right? Idi Amin, sometimes he would do business with the Soviet Union. Other times he was pro-imperialist. Israel brought Idi Amin into power in Uganda, and eventually it was the socialist government of Tanzania that ultimately removed Idi Amin. But his father was involved in human rights activism against Idi Amin. That is his story. It's actually quite interesting. There was a layer, right? Look, this is the crazy thing. I am really giving this guy a fair shake. Faramak, I am really giving this guy a fair shake. I am not bashing him, even though, and we're going to talk about, there's plenty, if I wanted to just unload on this guy, I could, but I just said I agreed with everything he stood for. I'm being very balanced here. And the fact that you can't even handle this, right? I'm being really balanced, really, really balanced here. And you can't handle this. That grow up, okay? Like, seriously, right? If you don't want to hear me talk, watch CNN. Like, grow the fuck up, all right? It'd be one thing if I was on here making fun of him, if I was on here just ripping him apart. I'm really bending over backwards to give this guy the benefit of the doubt, to point to good things about him and all of that. And I guess you're just so much of a fan, you can't tolerate any nuance, right? And I hate this. This is what's so fucking annoying about people on the internet. There's never any nuance. Are you on the red team or the blue team? I'm on the reality team, you asshole. That's what team I'm on, right? And I'm telling you, I think this guy is playing a good role, right? That's what, I'm telling you, based on the circumstances, based on right-wing Zionism and all of that, he's aligned with the power structure. I'm giving the guy the benefit of the doubt. But you are just so solidly playing team sports. Nuance and facts doesn't matter to you, right? And this is what I can't fucking stand. This is why I don't want to build, I'm never going to win the internet, right? I'm never going to win the internet because people on the internet can't think. They just want to shout, I support my team. And it's infuriating. I'm trying to teach you about the class forces of New York City. I'm trying to teach you about where this guy came from, but that's apparently, no, you can't do that. Can't do that. No. If I do anything but go, yay, I love this guy, you have a meltdown. Well, I'm sorry. This isn't kindergarten. I'm here to educate you. I'm not a demagogue. You want a demagogue, right? Demagoguing is preaching without teaching. And I'm sorry, I will preach, but I will teach while I preach. That's what I'm here to do. I'm not here to just make you feel good about what you already think. We get it, Farmook. You like the guy. There's a lot to like about him. I just said a lot of good things about him. There's plenty to like about him. But all you want to hear, you don't want to learn anything. You just want me to go, oh, he's great, right? You're afraid of learning, right? Maybe maybe I'm not going to say everything positive about him, but maybe in what I say, you might learn something. I'm trying to educate you. I'm trying to make you come away with this with information you didn't have. But you don't want that. You want nothing but blind apologism for him. And if you didn't like the guy, right? If you hated this guy, you would want me to do nothing but bash him. And you'd want nothing but, he's a doo-doo head. How about we learn? How about we learn something? Is that so hard? Right. And I mean, I usually don't respond when people are being like this, but Farmook is a regular here on the channel and I value him as part of the community. I really do. And on top of that, this is the problem. This is the problem. It's the problem in our circles. You don't learn anything if all you will allow yourself to hear is apologism, right? If all you'll allow yourself to hear is cheering or jeering, you're never going to learn anything. I think this guy right now, I think he's doing okay. I think he's doing, I praised him and I've said he's opposing Zionism. He's on an anti-Zionist platform. He's got an economic program for the city that would make the city better. But that's not good enough for you, right? Because I dare bring up that he's backed by the establishment and that they're using him against the lower levels of capital, because I dared critique what he says about what socialism is and how that's unappealing to the bulk of the American people. You can't handle that. I find that very frustrating. I really do. And Farmook, I value you, right? You're somebody I see in the chat night after night. You understand what this community is about and how it's there. And so I'm challenging you, Farmook. I'm challenging you to think deeper about this. This guy is playing a good role. And, so far, his program is good. He's opposing Israel. He has a program that would improve economic life in the city. That's great. Okay. And, every so often somebody in the chat gets me going, but I just, I needed to say this, right? That there is nuance to this story. So anyhow, so what's interesting is, on the African continent, the Soviet Union had a huge amount. There was a huge layer of people who were aligned with the Soviet Union, and they were not all communists, right? In the capital C sense, right? There were communist parties. There's a Communist Party of South Africa. There's communist parties in many countries, but the Soviets had a much bigger layer of support, right? There was a united front. And all over the African continent, there are political parties that were originally Soviet aligned. The ruling party of South Africa is called the African National Congress, and it was originally led and was founded by members of the South African Communist Party. In Namibia, the ruling party is called SWAPO, the Southwest African People's Organization. SWAPO was originally started by communists, right? In Angola, the ruling party is called the MPLA, the Liberation Movement of the People of Angola, right? And it was started by communists, and it's a Marxist-Leninist political party. It started out as, right? And all over the African continent, you had various political parties that were the communists were part of it, but there was a bigger, wider tent. Kwame Nkrumah, the leader of Ghana, right? He was not a communist. He said he was not a Marxist-Leninist. He called himself an African socialist. That's how he described himself. But he traded with the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union brought, and he was Soviet aligned, but he was not a communist. He was part of a wider tent. It was a wider circle. And, Julius Nyerere was the leader of Tanzania, and he was a Marxist, called himself an African socialist, but he wasn't a member of the Communist Party, and he was more China aligned, right? It's, there was a whole layer of these people. After the Soviet Union fell, all right, these parties were, these folks, a lot of them didn't know what to do because the Soviet Union fell, and Russia in the 90s, really didn't have a lot of power. Its economy was very weak, and they were being looted and demolished. And China at that point was aligned with the United States. And so after the fall of the Soviet Union, many of these communist groups on the African continent officially dropped Marxism-Leninism and aligned with the Second International, or social democracy, right? The African National Congress did that. MPLA of Angola did that. And in fact, many of the ruling parties, even up to today on the South African continent, are parties that are part of the Second International with the British Labour Party, etc. Right? What's interesting is that even happened other places. It even happened within the U.S. Communist Party. Angela Davis, right, was the face of the American Communist Party. They had the old Gus Hall was the old trade unionist from the 30s, the big, tall Finnish guy from Minnesota, Gus Hall, and then Gus Hall's, assistant, his vice chair, was Angela Davis. And Angela Davis was an African American woman who was a communist who'd hung around the Black Panthers, was a philosophy professor. And she was the face. They were the two faces of Soviet politics in America. Gus Hall, the trade unionist, and Angela Davis, the Black revolutionary. In the early 90s, Angela Davis led a big layer of people within the Communist Party USA to denounce Marxism. To denounce Marxism-Leninism and become social democrats. And they became the committees of correspondence. And they walked out of the Communist Party's convention. And prior to that, they had announced support for Gorbachev. They had opposed the arrest of Gorbachev by the so-called hardliners. And they supported the fall of the Soviet Union. They thought the Soviet Union liquidating was a good thing. The committees of correspondence. And it was a very similar thing. There was always a layer within official communism. The Soviet Union, the reason the Soviet Union fell is because there was a big layer of the Soviet Communist Party that stopped believing in communism. Gorbachev didn't believe in communism. He openly believed that, that the Soviet Union could transition to being a welfare state, and that if they liquidated the USSR, that the U.S. government and NATO would allow them to just kind of become a welfare state, and that would be better because there'd be more human rights, etc. And that was the idea. And if you look at the global communist movement, there was a layer like that in almost every communist party in the world. The British Communist Party officially dissolved after the fall of the Soviet Union. The American Communist Party had Angela Davis lead a big walkout, and that there was a layer of kind of moderates within, they called them the reformists, right? The reformists within official communism, Soviet-aligned communism. The Euro communist parties, the French Communist Party, the Italian Communist Party, the Spanish Communist Party had already completely cut ties with the Soviet Union. But among the parties that were still Soviet aligned, there was a big faction of people that were anti-Soviet, anti-communist, leaning towards social democracy. And a lot of those people just straight up walked away at the time of the fall of the Soviet Union. They were almost like they were inside of the Soviet communist parties to pull them away from the Soviet Union. I mean, I'm not joking. I mean, that was actually the case. And in 1978, it worked, right? The Italian communist, the Euro communist parties officially cut their ties with the Soviet Union, the French communists, etc. And within all the official communist parties of the world, there was a layer of people that were like, I mean, I don't want to say they were sent in by the CIA, because that would be like, it wasn't like the CIA called them up and said, go infiltrate. It wasn't like that. These were people who liked the trade unions. Maybe they liked Lenin. Maybe they liked the nostalgia for communism, but they were against the Soviet Union. And they were trying to support people in the Soviet Union that wanted to break the Soviet Union apart, like Gorbachev. And they were trying to nudge their parties to move away from the Soviet camp. And there was a whole layer of people like that. And after the fall of the Soviet Union, they walked away. And that appears to be who Zohran's parents were. Now, his mother is a Hollywood film director who was actually one of the people they wanted to direct one of the Harry Potter movies. And his father is tied up in like liberal woke academia. and he is married to an anti-Syrian government, an anti-Assad activist. His spouse is heavily involved in the struggle was heavily key in bringing down the Syrian government. So he's tied in with the liberal human rights activist, woke CIA apparatus. Okay. And again, if that makes Farouk mad that I said that, I'm sorry. Facts are funny things. They don't care about your feelings. That's who this guy is, and that's why he's talking about redistribution of wealth, and that's why he's talking about income inequality, and because at the end of the day, he doesn't actually believe that the banks, factories, and industries should be organized for the people. And he certainly doesn't support, the Syrian Arab Republic, a socialist country that organized the banks, factories, and industries and built the country up. He wants degrowth, right? He wants to kick around lower level capitalists. In New York City, though, that's not really bad because those lower level capitalists are insane, over the top Zionists, and it's complicated. So this is at this point, I think the guy's playing a good role. But, he's appeared on Stephen Colbert. This guy is from the CIA liberal milieu, and I find it frustrating that there's not somebody, who's like a legit anti-imperialist, who is playing the role that he's playing. And there's questions here. This guy's supposed to be a Shia Muslim, right? If he's a Shia Muslim, why does he go to trans rights rallies, right? Why? Right? Shia Muslims, I guess, the Ayatollah of Iran believes that you can be trans. In Iran, you can be trans. You just can't be, you can't be, genderqueer or whatever. You have to be one or the other. You want to become a woman if you're a man? Fine. They got surgery, you're a man. You want to become a man if you're a woman? Fine. But you can't be either one, right? They're not pro-trans in the same way we are, and they certainly aren't pro-LGBT, right? Homosexuality is considered to be, Shia Muslims, and all Muslims pretty much are opposed to homosexuality. Well, this guy's a Shia Muslim, but, he's fine with that. Also on abortion, right? Now, this guy apparently, is pro-abortion. Now, how can you be a Shia Muslim and be pro-abortion? Now, I've heard some people say that some Muslims say abortion is okay up to a certain number of months, right? But that's not this guy's position. This guy is pro-choice. He's a pro-choice liberal. Why? How does that work? And does he really believe that? Or, is he really a Shia Muslim? I don't know. I'm interested. So far, the guy's playing a decent role. The guy's playing a good role, right? I'll say that much. But he's from a layer of people that were in the Soviet camp, but nudging it in a bad direction. He's from the Gorbachev wing. His parents were like within that Angela Davis, Gorbachev, liberal activist, human rights wing of communism that then broke with communism after the fall of the Soviet Union. And this guy isn't grassroots, right? His mom's a Hollywood film director, right? His dad's all tied up in the liberal NGO, academia thing. This guy's been on the Colbert Show. This guy is not a grassroots guy. This guy is a product of the liberal CIA, right? Like AOC, etc. But in this case, he might play a good role. And I'll, give him a chance, but I'm just telling you who he is, right? He's from the degrowth faction, which nationally is the main danger, but not necessarily in New York City, right? In New York City, the Zionist stuff is so out of control. And, the real estate speculation, it's complicated. In New York City politics, I think he's right. He's probably the best, guy out there that I know of. He's certainly better than Andrew Cuomo. He's certainly better than Eric Adams. Certainly better than Rudy Giuliani, certainly better than even better than Bill de Blasio. For New York City, this guy's pretty damn good. I would probably vote for him in the general election. I did vote in the primary, not telling how I voted, but for New York City politics, this guy's decent. And the fact that he won is good because it's a repudiation of the fact that this city is under the control of pro-Israel folks. Now, he's technically pro-Israel, but he's too critical. He said he would not visit Israel. He condemns Israeli atrocities against the Palestinians. That's good for me, right? That works for me. I like what I'm hearing here. I think he's playing a good role in New York City politics, right? I think he represents the liberal CIA, and I don't think on foreign policy he would ever play a good role. But then again, he's not running to be a senator. He's not running to be a member of the Congress. He's not running for president. He's running for mayor of New York City. So I don't know. This guy, I mean, so far I like what I'm hearing. And at the very minimum, the fact that people would vote for him is a good sign. It's a repudiation of Israel, and it's a repudiation of big real estate owners. I mean, I like what I'm seeing so far.
There it is. So what do you say to people who look at your background and they wonder? They say, okay, rising star you may be, but this is the largest city in America, $112 billion budget, 8 million people, and a hell of a lot of problems. And they say, okay, whatever the future may be, you're not ready now.
I would say that a campaign offers a glimpse of what an administration would look like. And we built a campaign the likes of which the city has not seen in a long time. We started with 2 full-time employees and now are managing 50,000 volunteers. At the beginning of this race, there were questions of whether we'd get 50,000 votes. And yet we had 50,000
volunteers.
50,000 volunteers who knocked on 1.5 million doors, made 2.1 million phone calls. And ultimately, it's a story of not only being able to inspire people, but absorb that inspiration.
I hate this. I mean, look, that's bullshit right there, right? That's bullshit. Oh, yeah, we had nothing. Oh, we started in my basement with just 2 nickels, but it was a dream. It's like, come on, right? Your mom is a Hollywood film director. You've been on the Colbert show. I mean, you're a product. Yeah, you come from above, and that's what pisses me off. That's what pisses me off. But let him continue.
And build an organization. And I think that's also the story of what it means to run a city, that you are ultimately responsible, but you're also determined by hiring the best and the brightest. And that's what I will be doing in City Hall. I'll be hiring those that have a clear track record of excellence, of results that come from a wide variety of mayoral administrations, and finally bring public excellence back into the public sector.
All right, so you caught a lot of attention for confronting Tom Homan, Trump's border czar, about the deportation policies, which have a lot of impact here in New York. Here you are.
Do you believe in the First Amendment? Do you believe in the First Amendment, Tom Homan?
So that moment went viral. All right, then after the primary.
Totally spontaneously, too. It went viral, totally spontaneously. That's how the internet works. It's just totally democratic. No one boosted him or anything. I mean, people were just so moved by seeing one guy at a protest, and
Homan was asked about your plan, which is on your website. You said that you would end the city's cooperation with ICE agents that has been going on under Mayor Adams, and he has spoken out. Here's what he said.
Good luck with that. Federal law trumps him every day, every hour of every minute. We're going to be in New York City. Game on. We're coming.
Game on. He's coming. What do you say?
That I'm going to be here to stand up and fight back. And unlike the current mayor, I'm not going to be working alongside the Trump administration to build the single largest deportation force in American history. I'm going to actually represent each and every New Yorker. And that includes immigrant New Yorkers. And that means standing up for the laws of this city, like our sanctuary city policies, which have kept New Yorkers safe for.
Hey, ICE is breaking the law right now. I mean, there's no way around that. ICE is, deporting people to El Salvador on the basis of their tattoos. ICE is going after people for their political views. ICE is, there's no procedure. I mean, yeah, he's not wrong. I mean, yeah, I'm not, again, I don't think the answer to the immigration crisis is open borders. And I don't think that the answer, is to say there is no crisis and you're racist if you acknowledge one. But no, ICE is breaking the law. ICE is acting in a criminal manner that violates the rights of people. Immigrants have rights. They're people. Immigrants have rights, right? You don't have to be a citizen to have human rights. People that are in this country that, are not citizens still have basic human rights, and you can't throw them in prison for their tattoos, and you can't deport them because they disagree with Israel. And yeah, I mean, again, I am not going to jump on the woke bandwagon, but he's not wrong. I mean, yeah, I think it's good that he's not going to cooperate with ICE. ICE should follow the law, right? We have procedure in the United States. We have procedures for a reason, and he's right. I think he's absolutely right.
And were defended by Republicans and Democrats alike for years until we got this mayor who fear-mongered about them so extensively.
Does that involve the NYPD?
it means that the NYPD would actually serve New Yorkers and not assist ICE in their operations. We recently saw ICE agents.
So they would not assist ICE?
Not assisting ICE, because ultimately their job is public safety. And I know officers who are signing up to take on serious crimes, not to be a part of the force that is arresting a pastor who's peacefully observing the arrest of a migrant at Federal Plaza.
All right.
Now, this is interesting. NYPD is is the pro-Trump axis. NYPD is also very pro-Trump, right? The police department is pro-Trump. They're Democrats, but they're pro-Trump. They're against, a lot of them are Democrats in that they're elected, they're appointed by elected officials, but at the same time, they are also conservative, right? They're anti-immigrant. They're certainly opposed to Black Lives Matter and such. And the NYPD is a powerful force within the city. And, the mayor is guarded by the NYPD. Bill de Blasio, when he spoke at a police officer's funeral, they turned their backs on him because he had criticized the NYPD around the death of Eric Garner. And, that's interesting. I mean, if he is as solidly anti-Trump, if he's anti-Trump, which it sounds like he is, the NYPD is certainly going to push back against him, right? And he's going to have to. The NYPD is a powerhouse in New York City, and they are right wing. They are Trump aligned. So, and that's the New York Post, and that's part of that Trump coalition that includes those lower level real estate owners, hates Muslims, all that. So, that's very interesting.
So a moment ago, you talked about how you didn't know if you'd get 50,000 votes, and you ended up with 50,000 volunteers. They knocked on doors. There are many in the country who might look at that and say, okay, that makes me think of somebody else who took on I'm trying to think of the right word to use, but somebody who expected to win and therefore didn't campaign that hard and lost. And the person who did that was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, right? Famously also here in New York. She endorsed you early. She helped you. She just spoke to Manu Raju, a few moments ago. She said the Democratic Party needs to pay attention to your success right now. Here's what she just told him.
We have a choice to listen to that message that people are sending us or not. This isn't just about Mr. Mamdani as an individual. This is about the message that the people of New York City are trying to send to our party.
So there's now talk, that your victory puts her in a whole new light, right? It puts her and Bernie Sanders, not that they were seen as fringe, but they were seen as a wing of the party. And that
and they were a huge disappointment. I got to say, I bent over backwards. I went to her town halls. I was so happy when she won, and she has been an epic disappointment. And we didn't exactly know where she came from, but it turned out she was basically she was pulled out of a lineup. She was, selected by the power structure. She was a staffer for Ted Kennedy. And then they decided they needed somebody to be the millennial socialist Democrat in Congress. And they picked her out and they planted her, and it was all from above. And she has not done one anti-imperialist thing at all. Anti-Venezuela, anti-China, anti-Iran, anti-Russia, pro-Israel, denounces DSA because they're too anti-Israel, claims that she might be Jewish just to pander to the Zionist community harder, right? Claims that maybe that her last name is a name that Jews in Spain changed their name to in the 1400s in the Inquisition. So she herself might be a Jew. It's pretty bad. She has been an epic disappointment. And what I hear from her being endorsed, and what I also hear from her, from Chuck Schumer and all these people suddenly talking positively about this guy, is that he's part of the same machine. That said, again, I want to give people a chance, so there we go.
That becomes more of the center, and that you are part of that. Do you see it that way? And do you see those who say, look, your victory propels her to a presidential run in 2028?
She's been an inspiration, and it's been an honor to be represented by her as an assembly member.
She has not been an inspiration. I'll just tell you that much. She has not been an inspiration. She voted for the Iron Dome. And that's what's telling me whoever the tech monopolies and all of that, that's who picked this guy. That doesn't mean this guy won't play a good role, because those folks, they don't like Netanyahu, right? And that there's a lot of Israelis who are protesting Netanyahu right now. So I'm not saying that means this guy will play a bad role, but it's the same people that are backing AOC. It is the tech monopolies and the CIA kind of woke apparatus. That's who's backing this guy. I mean, right there, we can tell. That doesn't mean he'll play a bad role, and there's nuance to all these things.
Astoria for many years. And I think about a senior who works at a childcare center that I met in Sunnyside, Queens, who told me that I'm not a progressive, but I realized when I looked at Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders, they were the only ones who were willing to fight for me.
Yeah.
And
they didn't fight. They stole the primary from Bernie, and he did nothing about it. Right? They stole the primary from Bernie Sanders twice, and the emails were leaked in 2016, and he did nothing about it. And he said, vote for Hillary and vote for Biden. I mean, and Bernie Sanders says it's okay for Israel to bomb Iran. It's just the USA shouldn't get involved, but it's totally fine for Israel to engage in an unprovoked, vicious attack against Iran. I mean, yeah, I'm sorry. Bernie has not fought. No, he has not. He is part of the pro-war establishment, and he, basically functioned as a sheepdog for Hillary Clinton. He said a lot of good things, and then arranged for people to vote for Hillary Clinton who would never do those good things.
That's what so many New Yorkers and Americans understand, is that these are the two individuals who have been willing to take on this oligarchy and actually stand up for dignity for Americans.
Before you go, one last thing. Bill Ackman, I just mentioned him as right, he's the billionaire hedge fund manager, but he's not alone. There are a lot like him, whether it's Ken Griffin or CEOs of big banks. Would you meet with them?
I'll meet with anyone. I will meet with them, and I'll explain why I believe in the necessity of raising the top corporate tax rate. And I'd also tell Bill Ackman that I firmly disagree with his attempt to dismantle diversity, equity, and inclusion across the country, because it's not only against the morals of so many, it's also against the actual bottom line for so many businesses.
So here's my question, right? This is just a question. I don't know what it means, right? But the main apparatus that tries to keep anti-imperialism and woke tied to each other is a building in New York City called the People's Forum, right? It's run by the Party for Socialism and Liberation. It's the Danny Haiphong, Ben Norton, Vijay Prashad, they're all about trans rights, and you're a Nazi if you don't believe in trans rights. They're all about about abortion, and if you don't believe in abortion, you're a Nazi. But they also support North Korea, but they also support Cuba, they also support Iran, etc. Right? It is the main building that tries to keep woke and anti-imperialism connected with each other, right? My question is, does Zohran speak at the People's Forum? Fair question, right? AOC has never spoken at the People's Forum, right? Does Zohran speak at the People's Forum? I'd be curious, right? Does he? It's, they've got a building. They're in Manhattan. It's a pretty expensive building on 38th Street. Does Zohran speak at the People's Forum? I'm not saying that'll necessarily tell us very much, but does he show up there and try to get their support and try to get their vote, or not? Right? I mean, we will see. We will see. They're already calling him a communist, and they're going to call him that no matter what. But is he, and that's the thing. He wouldn't lose anything, right? There's nobody that's going to be like, well, I was going to vote for Zohran. I knew he wasn't a dirty commie, and then he spoke at the People's Forum. There's no one who's going to say that, right? They're already calling him a dirty commie because his middle name's Kwame, because he calls himself a socialist or whatever. But my question is, does he have the ability to work with woke anti-imperialists? Right? Right? It would be a good thing. It would be a good thing, but will he do it? That'll tell us a lot, right? He panders to woke. That's of course, he's a Democrat. What's he going to do? But does he think that the anti-imperialist wing of woke is legitimate or not? That's my question. That's my question, right? Does he feel that PSL, Ben Norton, Vijay Prashad, Danny Haifong are allowed to be part of his coalition. Do they get a seat at the table or not? I have a feeling that they don't, but hey, it ain't over till it's over. And, you know, honestly, in New York City, if he were to let them just have a seat at the table, that would be huge, right? If he was to actually let them have a seat at the table, that would be huge. You know, because that would mean that while, you know, his main layer of support is pro-imperialist woke, some anti-imperialist woke would have a seat at the table. That would be a good sign. And it's possible. We shall see. We shall see. You know, my feeling is that anti-imperialism needs to get out of woke. But in New York City, that doesn't apply. In New York City, the anti-woke are crazy Zionists that are pro-Israel. And in New York City, you know, in New York City, there is a very small faction, but they've got a building and they're well funded. I think they're an intelligence operation of anti-imperialist woke. So in terms of New York City politics, if he were to actually sit down with PSL, if he were to actually sit down with People's Forum, that would be a good thing. That would mean that he's open to talking to anti-imperialists. AOC has never done that. So we'll see. We shall see. You know, but again, my position on this guy is based on what I've seen for New York City politics, this is pretty damn good. You know, what's the Rolling Stones? You can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you'll get what you need. I don't know if this guy is what we need, but, you know, you can't always get what you want. I guess the first part is true. And for New York City, for somebody who might possibly be our mayor, this is pretty damn good so far. You know, I mean, maybe he gets into office and doesn't do any of it. Maybe he gets into office and suddenly loves Netanyahu, but he would arrest Netanyahu. That's pretty cool, right? He's making all the hardcore Israel supporters really mad. That's pretty cool. So, hey, you know, I'm kind of with you. I'm okay with the dude. You know, I think it would be better if he won the election than if he didn't. You know, that was kind of my feeling about Trump during the election. And Trump obviously disappointed us, but it was better that people voted for a guy who said he would stop the wars, even though he didn't. And that's my feeling with this guy, right? This guy might turn out to not be any good, but wouldn't it be better if people voted for a guy who said all these things? That's kind of my feeling. If this guy were to win the election, that would be a very good sign. It would be a repudiation of Israel. It'd be a repudiation of the Israel lobby. And it would be a slap in the face to right-wing Zionists. And it might lead to, you know, this city actually being affordable. Imagine that. So, I mean, again, he's not real, right? And I'm not going to lie to you and say he's real. And no, I'm not going to let him get away with saying, oh, yes, our whole campaign was just me and it was just me and my little dog Scrappy. And we were homeless on the street and we found 2 nickels and we decided to run for mayor. But God, build it and they will come. God, I'm not going to, no. Okay. No, he's not real. All right. No, he's not from below. He's not grassroots. This guy is from above, but he's from a wing of above that is at odds with some people that are pretty awful that are, trying to get us into World War III right now. So that sounds cool. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of my position, right? No, he's not real. He's not from below. He's not from the people. No, he's from above. And that said, he's from a faction of above that might be hard on the faction that wants to get us into World War III, right? The Trump camp is very large. You have Marjorie Taylor Greene in the Trump camp. You have Thomas Massey. But in New York City, the Trump camp is the go to war with Iran camp. In New York City, the Trump camp is Pamela Geller, right? This piece of shit named Pamela Geller. I have been arrested twice in my life. I have had 2 arrests in my life. The first arrest that I had was during Occupy Wall Street. I've shown video of it on here. We seized, on Martin Luther King Day, we seized a bank lobby to demand full employment. My second arrest was at the MTA, the New York City Transit Authority of New York, because they put ads in the subway paid for by this Zionist billionaire named Pamela Geller. And the ads said, Israel versus Palestine. In a fight between civilized man and savages, support the civilized man. Unbelievable. Called the Palestinian savages. So there was a board meeting, an MTA board meeting, and I went to the MTA board meeting with activists. I went to the MTA board meeting, and I signed up and I spoke, and there was a sign-up sheet to speak, and my name was on the list. They called my name, and then Pamela Geller, the Zionist billionaire who paid for those racist ads, walked in, and her name wasn't on the sheet. It wasn't on the goddamn sheet. They cheated. They broke their own rules. Well, she's a billionaire. She can speak. She didn't sign up. And there were other activists who didn't get to speak, right? And she didn't follow the rules. She didn't fill out the form. And so she got up to speak. So I stood on my chair and I started yelling at her. And I said, wait, her name's not on the sheet. She can't. And I started yelling, and the NYPD tackled me, and they took me on the other room, and, and I was placed under arrest. And I thought, okay, I'm going away for 26 hours. I'll see the judge in 26 hours. But I guess the MTA police really didn't want to do the paperwork of taking me downtown. So after handcuffing me to the chair and, trying to get me to answer a bunch of political questions, which I wouldn't answer, they released me, and they said, you might get a summons in the mail, and I never got one. That was my second arrest, and it's technically an arrest, even though it doesn't show up on the records. It was mentioned in like the news articles about it, and you can watch the news reports. But Pamela Geller, she's the face of Trump supporters in New York City, and right now they are the bomb Iran, go to war with Iran, faction of New York City, and they're awful. They're dangerous, and they are the main danger in New York City politics at this time. They are. These people would have us, have a nuclear war just to make sure that Netanyahu can, stay in power. So, if this guy, is rising in politics and becoming prominent to stop them, good. Sounds good to me. No objection from me. I just, I'm giving the guy the benefit of the doubt. I'm not going to pretend he's grassroots. I'm not going to pretend he's an anti-imperialist. He is not an anti-imperialist, but he's standing up to the go to war with Iran faction, and that's good enough for me. That works. I'm against going to war with Iran, and I'm against Israel controlling our politics in America and getting a free pass to violate human rights. So, hey, good for him. Good for him. Good for him. And on that note, folks, names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? I have already gotten a couple super chats. There's one Rumble rant that's come in, and someone sent me a couple super chats. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Who's with us? Walker in Kansas City, Missouri. Joshua Tree Kinkle. St. David's, Bermuda. Dave in Jerusalem. Alex in Brazil. Auckland, New Zealand. Matt 22, NYC. Kew Gardens, New York. A lot of New Yorkers on tonight. Brooklyn from the house. Say a prayer for Phil. He's having some health issues. Please, our brother Phil, we are on your side. Everyone on this streams loves you, Phil. Everyone knows you. They know your face. You've called in. You're a good friend of ours, and we're all thinking about you. I know you're dealing with some health issues, so we're all pulling for you. Everyone, please say a prayer for our friend Phil. He's having some health issues, and we really love you, Phil, and we hope that you can have a swift recovery. So hang in there, Phil. Hang in there. There we go. K in New Orleans, Bendigo, Australia, SW in Missouri State, Denmark. Wow. Salt Lake City. There you go. My goodness. Did someone just curse out our friend Phil? We're not going to have that. You're banned. Yeah. Unbelievable. Trolls can be unbelievable, right? We're all pulling for you, Phil. Feel better. JT24 in Mississippi. Warmonger America. That's our country. Yeah. Dave in Rochester. Jacob in Wisconsin. Get better, Phil. Health issues suck ass. Yes, many people can attest to that. It is not fun to be sick. Denver and Minnesota. Shout out to Denver. You're an awesome dude, Denver. Melissa in Virginia. Volin in South Carolina. Deha in Seattle. You're an awesome dude, Deha. Looking forward to seeing you. Y'all skip me quick. Did I? Talk cryptography. We haven't skipped you. Big up, Phil. See, everyone's cheering for Phil. Get well soon, Phil. Get better, Phil. Phil, you got a lot of support here in the chat. You got a lot of support. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us here tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Justin in Utah Saint. Where is Utah Saint? Is that in Utah? Or is that another city? Names and locations. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Jenny Lynn. You got him, Jenny. Anyway. Patrick in Maine. Patrick in Maine. Good to see you, Patrick. Salt Lake, LOL. All right. Get well soon, Bill. All right. Very, very good. Jason Ganon from New Hampshire. So excited to be free. Well, I like to be free too. Freedom. Freedom. Phil's a good sport, right? It's Braveheart, right? It's the end of Braveheart. Freedom. Freedom. Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson. All righty. Anybody else? Names and locations. Names and locations. Names and locations. Folks, I've had a decent day today. Today, I actually got a phone call from the venue. And they told me that people have been calling the venue to find out about coming to the convention, which is really, really great. And, you know, Noah was doing great outreach and people are registering. This event is really turning into something, right? I'm very, very excited. Please come to the convention in Chicago. It's going to be awesome. It is going to be awesome. Please come. It's going to be awesome. If you can't make it, please send us a donation. We would really, really appreciate a donation if you can send it. But yeah, I'm feeling good, right? Scott Ritter is coming. We booked his ticket this morning. Scott Ritter is going to be there. The great Scott Ritter, who's spoken at multiple CPI events before. He's flying in. His flight is booked. Scott will be in the house. Angela McCurdle of the Libertarian Party will be in the house. Reverend Milhan Stevens, Boston Family Church, in the house, right? Keith Preston from Attack the System in the house. David Fox in the house. Don DeBar in the house. Sayed Husseini, the great Iranian-American commentator and anti-imperialist voice, in the house. I mean, it's going to be amazing. I mean, plenty of our own active members are going to be there. Penny and Noah and Gavin and Jeff Young, the great anti-imperialist candidate and critic of NATO, Kentucky Party founder, also a CPI member. He'll be there. It's going to be amazing, right? There will be a dance team that will perform, a Russian or former Soviet Union dance team will perform. Brian, folk musician, is going to play music. We are doing the opening ceremony so completely different. It's going to be a unique thing. It will not be like previous CPI events. Number one, it's going to be bigger, right? The venue actually holds 500 people. So there's that. But on top of that, it's going to be, we're doing a whole new format. It's going to be really something special. You don't want to miss it. It's 3 sessions. Doors open at 9. And there'll be a morning session, an evening session, and an afternoon session. It's going to be awesome. So I really hope that you're there. We need all hands on deck. So if you're a CPI member, please come. Also, for the CPI members, we are having on July 13th, the National Assembly of the organization, where we will be electing regional leaders of CPI, right? Having elections, right? We're having an election. We're also going to pass resolutions, and we're going to have a very long Q&A session with yours truly, with me, about CPI, about everything that we're doing. And that's on July 13th at an undisclosed location in Chicago. So if you're a CPI member, you also should be there on the 13th, because that's when we're having our National Assembly as an organization. And that's when we're going to take care of business, right? It'll be an afternoon and evening session on July 13th in the city. So yeah, you really don't want to miss it. July 12th and 13th, that's the big CPI weekend. And, CPI, we're constantly reinventing ourselves. We're on a journey that's very, very exciting. So we need you there. We need you there. If you're a member, we need you there. If you're interested in what our community does. I got a phone call from a man from Greece this morning. My phone rang. I don't know how he got my phone number. That's fine, right? My phone rang. And he said, "Hey, Caleb, I'm from Greece. I'm a lifelong communist. Can I come to your event?" I said, "Yes, sir, you can. Yes, sir, you can." Amazing, right? I mean, it just calls me, "Hey, Caleb, can I come?" Yep, yes, you can. Like it's gaining momentum. Those door hangers that are going on doors, those books that we're handing out, it's happening, folks. This. I have not seen this kind of momentum for a CPI event in a really long time. Right. This is really, really exciting. And it's our thing, right? I mean, we got some, big names coming in, but it's our thing. It's our show. And people are loving it. People are loving it, and they're going to love it even more on the big day. I am excited. I am so excited. And thank you to everyone who's helping out. A lot of people are working very, very hard right now. Let's be real. Gabby has had so much crap delivered to her house. All right. Her family thinks that she's rich on Amazon because every day there's, new supplies delivered to her house. Gabby, if you're watching, thank you for accepting supplies, right? We're sending Gabby all kinds of supplies, right? Big banners have gone to Gabby's house and all kinds of equipment and books and all kinds of stuff. Thank you, Gabby, for taking the books. Thank you, Ellie, for setting up, everything with the July 13th event and all the hard work that you do. Thank you, John, for doing the hard work, amazing work that you do. And thank you, Noah, for being there on the ground and working hard. And, thank you, Ethan, and thank you, everybody, right? Thank you, everyone in Minnesota, right? Minnesota, they're working really hard for it, right? They're having their own anti-war rally in Minnesota on Saturday. They're having a CPI rally. Right? Two of our members, Zach and Penny, they said, you know what? It's time for an anti-war protest. They decided to call an anti-war rally in Minneapolis. I am so excited. I can't wait to see the videos of the anti-war rally that they're putting on. Look, one of our members, Penny, just wrote a book. She wrote a book, right? It is now available on Ibrahim Traore, right? She's written some great articles. And I said, Penny, we got to turn your articles into a book. So now this book is now available and it'll be on sale at the convention. I'm picking it up from the printer next week, and it's already on Amazon if you want to get it, or you just want to pick up a copy at the convention. A book about the great anti-imperialist African leader, Ibrahim Traore, the latest CPI book. I couldn't be prouder that we've published a book about Ibrahim Traore. Who else has done that, right? I mean, I couldn't be prouder of CPI and what we have done, right? It's great, right? You can order the book. I mean, I couldn't be prouder of this group and what we're doing, right? I am really, really overjoyed by what we've done. We are an amazing, amazing organization. There is nothing like CPI, and the way American politics is going, we have got even bolder and more exciting adventures ahead of us. And we're about to have the biggest event we've ever done. And I am in a good spot. I am in a great, great spot, so come to the convention. Please come to the convention. That's what I'm asking you to do. If you can't make it, I know there's some people in the chat who were planning to go and they said, you know what, I just can't. Well, that's good. Just donate then, right? Send us a donation. Right. That is what you can do. If you can't make it, send a donation. Right. We have a GoFundMe that we've created, or you can just cash at me or whatever. The expenses are adding up. They always do. It always costs more than you plan for. That's just how these things work. So send us a donation. Link is in the description. Link is here. If you can't make it, send us a contribution, because we certainly need the money. I have gotten some great contributions. There was a great contribution that was sent in just today. Shout out to the person who did it. Very much appreciated, but more is always needed. You got to stay ahead of this, right? I'm putting let me just put it this way. I'm putting a lot of my own funds into this event, and I'm going to be paying it off for a couple months, right? I mean, a lot of it, there's some things you have to pay for immediately, but there's other things that, I'm going to be feeling this the next couple months. And that's fine because CPI is my life. CPI is what I believe in. But I would appreciate it if people could help us offset that cost. It would make my life a little less stressful. So please send us a contribution, right? Please send us a contribution. It would be greatly, greatly appreciated. It would make things move smoothly. It would cause a lot less stress. We got to rent cars and etc. So please send us a contribution. That would be great. That would be awesome. If you can just go to the GoFundMe right now or go to the Cash App and send us a contribution. Now, we have had a couple questions come in on Cash App. One of them is from Mike. And Mike says, has the principalist hardliner faction in Iran been strengthened by recent events? Will Iran show less willingness to play along with Western games? Mike, the way I understand Iran, the answer is an unequivocal yes. But, and I hate to say but, okay? I really do. The way I understand Iran, the hardliner faction is going to be the main winner here in Iranian politics because Israel attacked Iran, because Iran fought back against Israel in a way that no other country has, because the Iran nuclear deal has been so discredited at this point. All of that says to me that, yes, the hardliner faction will win. But, and I hate to say but, right? I am very proud of the fact that I interviewed Ibrahim Raisi, the Iranian president. But you'll all know that Ibrahim Raisi died after I interviewed him. And so did his foreign minister, and so did most of his close allies. He died in a helicopter crash. And many Iranian hardliners say that was not an accident. Many Iranian hardliners say that was the moderates that have infiltrated the Iranian military or whatever, that, the Iranian people voted for the hardliners, and there were people within the Iranian deep state that are moderates that took him out. Now, I'm not making this up, and I'm not saying that. I don't stand by that. I don't have any evidence. But I talk to people in Iran. There's a lot of Iranians I know, and there is adamant feeling among the hardliners that was an assassination. And part of the reason that they feel that way is because now Iran has a moderate president, which makes no sense. Like, how do they now have a moderate president? How, after everything that Iran has been through, do they have a moderate president again? And it appears that while at this point, the Iranian people, I mean, most young people in Iran don't vote at this point. Okay. The majority of Iranians were born, after the revolution. They're under the age of 35. And they just don't vote, right? There's a lot of young Iranians that are alienated from the political process, that are confused or whatever. They don't vote. But among Iranians who do vote, the hardliners have a clear majority. And there's a lot of young people in Iran that are confused. Some of them were really excited about Rouhani, but look how the Iran nuclear deal turned out, and they're not excited about him. And there are hardliner young people in Iran too. Right. And I met those young people in Iran, the hardliner Iranian young people that are fanatical supporters of the republic. They exist. But there's a lot of young Iranian young people that are just kind of like, they don't know what to do. Right. They're, so voting among young people is not very high. But among Iranians who vote, the hardliners have a clear majority. But it appears that there is a section of the deep state in Iran that is very solidly controlled by the moderates, that doesn't, and that is scary. And I don't know what to say about that. I'm not endorsing the theory that Raisi was killed. Well, I'm not, I don't, you never say anything you don't know. But so many Iranians have told me they believe they are absolutely sure of this. So many Iranians that I know, not all of whom are Muslims, right? Some of whom are communist atheists who live in Iran, or do citizens that are, they have no love for Raisi. He executed their friends. He was the executioner of communists in the 80s, right? He was the hardliner judge who who sentenced a lot of communists to death. They have no love for Riazi, but they know he represents the more anti-imperialist hardliner faction. And, there are Iranian Muslims I talked to who say Riazi was killed. There are Iranian communists I talked to that say Riazi was killed. And I'm not endorsing that, but I'm just telling you the amount of Iranians who believe that Riazi was killed by other forces within Iran that are moderate, that have a lot of money and power, and are well embedded in the military and the intelligence agencies. That makes me think that, even though, yes, the hardliners obviously are going to come out of this. I mean, the Iranian people are going to be solidly with the hardliners. There's, it's within the power structure. It's kind of like here, right? I mean, public opinion doesn't always lead to how the election turns out because, what choice do you end up getting? And, look, first of all, let me just throw this out there. Iran is more democratic than the United States. All right. And people say, that's crazy, Caleb. Everyone knows Iran's a brutal dictatorship. Blah, blah. How can you say that? Iran is more democratic than the United States. Why? Because the Iranian government depends on a mass movement. The only way the Iranian government stays in power is there is a mass movement. At the time that the Shah was in power and the revolution happened, Khomeini built a mass movement. And he organized Basij councils, and he organized the Islamic Revolutionary Guards, and he built a mass movement, and he came to power. And if that mass movement of everyday, ordinary people that go to a meeting every week or every couple days in their neighborhood and get political education and volunteer their time to go out on the street and enforce the Islamic law, and if it wasn't for the mass movement, the Islamic Republic would not be in power. So that's more democratic. It's not more freedom. There's definitely not the level of free speech, that we have in the West. I'm not talking about freedom. I'm talking about rule of the people. The Iranian government depends on a mass movement to stay in power. And if that mass movement went away, there would be no Islamic Republic. Whereas in America, our government depends on a lot of people with money being in power, right? It's very different. So in that sense, Iran is more democratic than the United States. The only way the Islamic Republic came into existence was there was an upsurge of participation, a mass movement, and they depend on that to stay in power. Now, that said, Iran is not totally democratic. And when I was in Iran, it's more democratic than America is, but it's not like a total free-for-all democracy. In Iran, they have elections. But in order to be the candidate for office, you must be approved by the Guardian Council. The Guardian Council, which is Ayatollahs, it's religious leaders, they approve everyone who's on the ballot. And if they don't approve you, you can't be on the ballot. And when I was in Iran, I sat down with a cleric, and a very important cleric, and he said to me, we are not a total democracy. And if the Guardian Council doesn't approve you, you're not on the ballot. And you know what? You in America, you have the exact same thing. And it's called Wall Street. If the people with the money don't approve you, you're not taken seriously as a candidate. And I said, you're right. You're absolutely right. If the people with the money, the mainstream media, if they don't consider you a real candidate, you're not treated as a candidate. And he said, now, which is better? To have your democracy guided by religious leaders who built a mass movement and organized a revolutionary movement to overthrow the Shah, or whoever just happens to have the most money? So there you go. But, Iran is not totally democratic. There is a movement, that, women in Iran, not only can they get on the ballot, they can vote. There are more women in the Iranian parliament than in the U.S. Congress. Women are generals in the military. Actually, there are women generals in the military. Women vote in Iran. Women are elected to public office in Iran. There's more women elected to public office in Iran than in the United States. And actually, there are more women in college in Iran than men, right? There are more women in college than men. So, but anyway, I digress. But that's a good question, Mike. It's a very, very good question. It's a very, very good question, and it's a fair question. And, the natural result of the 12-day war and everything that's happened should be the hardliners surging. but I won't guarantee you that that's going to happen because of what I'm hearing from Iranians. What Iranians are telling me about their political system is that there are very powerful people in the military and people with money that are moderates that are able to, get shit done that they want. And that's rather disturbing. But there you go. All right. Okay. Now, there were a couple other Cash Apps that were sent in, right? There was Mike. I answered his question. And then Troy, he said, just keep this as a token of my appreciation. Well, thank you, Troy. And then Troy also said, what do you know about Jose Maria Sison of the Philippines? Okay, I will answer that. Jose Maria Sison of the Philippines. He was a college professor who became a Maoist communist. And he was, I guess he died, but he's the intellectual leader of the Maoist communist insurgency, the New People's Army of the Philippines. Originally, they were funded by China, and they were with China during the Mao years. After Mao died, they cut off relations with China. And they actually declared that China was imperialist. They said the Soviet Union was imperialist. They took the hardline Maoist position. The Soviet Union was imperialist. After Mao died, they declared China was imperialist. And for a long time, the Philippines was a U.S.-backed dictatorship of Marcos, right? Marcos was the military strongman who was imposed on the Philippines by the USA. The USA had to kind of let him be a Bonapartist and build and, condemn the IMF and do some, pro-growth stuff because he was a barrier against communism. It was either Marcos or, the communists would run the Philippines. And so the USA allowed Marcos to be the military dictator. And then, as the Soviet Union was falling and, George Soros and all the liberal NGOs removed Marcos. And it's funny because, the standard communist narrative is that the overthrow of Marcos was just a people's democratic revolution. And it was that to some degree. Marcos was a brutal dictator, killed a lot of people. People didn't have freedom. He was pretty ruthless. But at the same time, the USA also wanted to remove him because he was a builder, right? And he was a military dictator. He was a military Bonapartist who built and constructed. And, they want neoliberalism. They want free markets, right? So, at the time the Soviet Union was falling, around that same time, George Soros and the liberal NGOs removed Marcos because he was too expensive, right? And he was trying to build up and develop the economy of the Philippines. Since the fall of Marcos, the Philippines had a quote unquote democratic government. And some of the communists, joined the government and surrendered and became a legal political party. And Jose Maria Sison's group did not, right? And they were the New People's Army, the National Democratic Front of the Philippines. But it's interesting because they have a very big legal wing in the Philippines that's like part of the government, right? Even though the actual, they control certain islands and the actual armed insurgent group is completely illegal. There's legal groups that everyone knows are actually the, part of the Maoist communist thing that are part of the government, right? Bayan, is the name of the liberal activist group that is secretly run by the Maoist communists. There was a time when I was in the Workers' World Party and the Bayan, which is the legal, they're legal liberal activists who sympathize with the Communist Party of the Philippines. We were quite close because they have a lot of people in America. They have developed where, if you go to any college, if you go to any college, where they have a significant number of Filipinos, you'll see an ad for, Filipino workshop, Filipino history or whatever, and you'll go to it and it's them, right? And they recruit a lot of people from very conservative families. Most Philippine Americans are Republicans, right? I mean, not all, but, it's largely a conservative layer. A lot of Filipino Americans are in the U.S. military, are conservative, are very anti-communist, but they recruit a lot of them to their communist group because they recruit on the basis of Philippine national identity. At one point I was in a communist group that was very close to Bayan, right? And so I observed, and they're very good organizers, very skilled, and they're illiberal, I would say. Now they're pro-LGBT. But they're illiberal. I mean, their organizing style they don't follow the kind of standard, way communist groups operate in America. They function in an illiberal manner, and people who don't like them call them a cult, and they're not a cult. They're just an illiberal, anti-imperialist communist organization, but they're not anti-imperialist anymore, right? So the last time I ever talked to somebody from Bayan was I had left the Workers' World Party, but Duterte had just been elected president of the Philippines, and U.S. media was calling Duterte a dictator, and they were supporting Duterte, right? It was like a popular front. Like they realized that Duterte had promised he would make peace talks with them. Duterte said he was going to appoint one of the Maoist communists to his cabinet, and they did the right thing, and they supported Duterte because he was kind of a populist who was talking anti-imperialism. Duterte got elected, won the election, and he appointed one of them to his cabinet. And then, ISIS started bombing the Philippines, and Duterte had to go to Donald Trump to get support to fight against ISIS. And one thing led to another. And, Jose Maria Sisson actually tried to give an unconditional surrender, right? Basically, Jose Maria Sisson was this older guy, and he's this old guy, and they control certain islands. And they offered an unconditional surrender to the Philippine government. And the USA would not allow, Duterte to accept their unconditional surrender. Very sad story. But Duterte is like, shit, ISIS is now attacking the Philippines. We got Muslim terrorism. We need the US to support us on that. And the Maoist communists, led by Jose Maria Sisson, offered an unconditional surrender. And the USA basically told them, you can't do that. And so they had to keep fighting. So, unfortunately, Duterte was pivoting toward being friendlier to China, right? He made a deal. There's a big fight in the South China Sea, right? The USA wants to control the South China Sea so it can threaten to cut off China's oil supply. China relies on oil that goes through the South China Sea. All right. And the reason China, you always hear in the US media about, there's military forces in the South China Sea, all this stuff. Well, that's because China needs oil, right? They rely on oil imports, and it comes from oil tankers that go to Shanghai in the South China Sea. And the USA wants to be able to threaten China by cutting off their oil supply, right? If the oil on the Chinese, if oil stops coming to China, the lights go out, right? It brings their industrial base, their economy stops. And so China has all kind of military forces in the South China Sea to make sure those oil tankers can just keep coming in. Now, the Philippines, Taiwan, the island of Taiwan, there's some Vietnamese islands that are contested. The South China Sea, there's a lot of different countries that claim different things, okay? But China has to make sure that those oil tankers in the South China Sea can keep supplying. So China has a lot of military forces in the South China Sea. The Philippines and China don't get along because the Philippines says, hey, part of the South China Sea is ours. China shouldn't be able to push us around. So Duterte made a deal with China that the Philippines gets the fishing rights and China can keep their military. It was a good deal. So Duterte was kind of pivoting toward being more friendly to China. So at that point, Duterte wouldn't accept the unconditional surrender of Jose Maria Sisson. And so Jose Maria Sisson and his people, they pivoted into the CIA camp, right? And a lot of them were already working at liberal, like, nonprofits and NGOs, and we're doing Stop Trump rallies and, trans stuff and all of that. I mean, a lot of them, and that's the U.S., Bayan organization. They're illiberal, right? They're not woke. They're illiberal. They're genuine communist, illiberal, like hardline Maoists, but they have embedded themselves in the woke NGO liberal apparatus. So there was already that connection. And when the Philippine government would not accept their surrender, and they, at that point, and so Radio Free Asia started promoting them. And in the final years of Jose Maria Sisson's life, they pivoted onto the side of U.S. imperialism against China. The main thing that they blew up and the main things they were targeting were Chinese businesses and Chinese ships. And they basically entered an alliance with U.S. imperialism against China. And I can't condone that. I feel sorry for them. It's not like they're bad people and that, politics is a dirty business, right? I don't think that they mean that they're, but they already had denounced China. They don't accept that China's anti-imperialist. They have an ultra-left, ultra-Maoist, crazy position on China already. And then things lined up in such a way that they pivoted into the pro-US side against China, and it sucks. And Jose Maria Sassani died, and they're not playing a good role in the Philippines, and they're really not playing a good role in American politics. They're demonizing China, and they're mobilizing Filipinos against China, and I can't condone that. So, Jose Maria Sasson, his organization went in a very bad direction at the time of his death. And they don't play a good role in the Philippines now, from what I understand. And it's unfortunate, and politics is complicated, right? It's complicated. But yeah, they're not. I would say that, unfortunately, due to a number of different factors, they were kind of backed into playing a negative role, right? And I don't think they're a positive force in the Philippines at this point. China, Belt and Road, BRICS, that's the future, and they're against it. And they're basically being boosted by U.S. imperialism against it. And that's unfortunate. But never say never. Look, there was a party there was one of these ultra Maoist parties in Nepal, led by Prachanda, and they took power and they won. And in order to win, they had to align with the other communists. And now the communists of Nepal are actually anti-imperialist, right? They were, right? So it's complicated, right? And, Fidel Castro at one point was getting U.S. support, right? The USA funded Fidel Castro against Batista. For a long time, the USA supported the dictator Batista, but then Fidel came along and he started winning, and then the CIA started giving him guns, and Eisenhower called him the Thomas Jefferson of Cuba, but then he pivoted to become an anti-imperialist, and then they hated him. So it's complicated, right? Politics and revolution is a messy business. I think Jose Maria Sasson was a dedicated communist and an anti-imperialist, but one thing led to another, and the way things have lined up in Filipino politics, they're on the wrong side, in my opinion. I mean, there's just no way around it. And look, I don't think this necessarily applies to the Philippines. I do have a critique of the Naxals in India and of the FARC in Colombia. It doesn't really apply to, the whole peaceful revolution. You should favor a peaceful road. Guerrilla warfare shouldn't be a way of life. But that's not really true for them, because they do function legally, right? They do have an above ground wing. They have, they are trying to take power peacefully. There are some islands that they control, but they've set up a whole peaceful revolution wing. So they're not the FARC, they're not the Naxals. It's more complicated, right? It's more complicated, and politics is just a messy business, right? It's just a messy, messy business, right? I mean, in a weird way, you can compare it to American politics. Why do we have to have CPI? Right? Why do we have to have CPI? We're anti-imperialists, we're pro-working class, so why don't we join the PSL? Why don't we join the Communist Party? Why don't we join the Workers' World Party? Why don't we join one of those groups? Because all those groups are on the wrong side. And why are all those groups on the wrong side? Because they're traumatized by years of being beaten up by right-wing conservatives. They're traumatized by years of, really since the new communist movement of the 70s, those groups have made no effort to reach the masses. They are hiding in liberal safe spaces, but it's not because they're bad. It's because they're traumatized. It's because they tried in the 70s, especially the RCP, but some of the other groups, they really tried to reach out to the American people, and it didn't work. And they got killed, literally killed in Greensboro, North Carolina, and they got murdered and they got beaten up. And, unfortunately, you look at the new communist movement of the 70s, they were doing the right thing and it didn't work, and they retreated, right? And you can read Out of the Movement to the Masses, read my history of the new communist movement. And those groups are on the wrong side in American politics. They are tailing woke, and they have the attitude that if you're anti-woke, you must be a Nazi. And they thought Trump was the greater of two evils when he was promising not to. I mean, they've lost the plot, but it makes sense based on their circumstances. And so we have to have CPI to get to the masses. If we were in the Workers' World Party, we would never have been allowed to march through the streets of New York City with a big banner that said only peace can make America great again and had Trump and Kim shaking hands. We could never do that. If we were in the PSL, we would never have been able to publish this book about the Houthis and distribute it in bulk because, I wrote it and I'm a white guy and I'm not a transgender Puerto Rican. And in this book, I talk about John Brown. I try to appeal to the American spirit. I mean, that's the most evil thing ever in PSL. We wouldn't be able to do any of the good shit that we do if we were in one of these other groups because it's similar to Jose Maria Sasson. These other groups have been backed into a corner where they have to act stupid and woke, right? Well, we're not. We're not. Right? We don't have their baggage. I'm friends with the Moonies. The Unification Church, they want peace with North Korea. So do I. Right? Look, and I was in the Workers' World Party for years. Workers' World Party and the Moonies used to get into fistfights, right? Because Workers' World Party supported North Korea. The Moonies were supporting South Korea. And they said communism was the greatest evil that had ever existed. They used to literally beat the hell out of each other. They would have fistfights and all of that. But now the woke people all think Trump is the same as North Korea, and Trump wants peace with North Korea, and the Moonies want peace with North Korea. And in fact, they're the main group that has advocated for peace with North Korea. And I'm not in the Workers' World Party, and I am not, and so I showed up at a Unification Church on Sunday morning and said, hey, I want peace with North Korea. So do you guys. Let's work together. Right? I can do that because I don't have their baggage. I was born in 1987. So in 1981 or 1978, when these people were having fistfights with the Moonies, I wasn't born yet. That's not my baggage. That's their baggage. It's not mine. I don't have that baggage. So CPI can get shit done that these people can't do because we don't have their baggage, right? And we don't, right? I have no objection, right? I don't hate Republicans. I am proud to be a Christian. I'm proud of my Christian faith. These people, Christians beat them up. Christians, they're alienated from American society. Being a Christian meant you were pro-war. They have all this trauma around Christianity. I don't, right? I did for a while. I went through, I had to go through what I went through when I was young, but I've returned to my Christian faith. And in fact, I would never have become an anti-imperialist if it wasn't for my Christian faith. So it's like we're able to do what we're doing because we're doing something new. We don't have all the baggage of communism, right? If you're part of communism TM or official communism, that comes with a huge amount of baggage, and that baggage renders you politically impotent. I mean, there's just not, you can't really build an anti-imperialist movement and hold on to communism trademark. You can't. All right. And again, that sucks, but it's just the reality. If you're doing the hammer sickle thing, and if you're saying I'm the pure Marxist-Leninist, you can't really recruit from the masses, right? You can't, because the masses think that Joe Biden is a communist, right? And wokeism is degrowth, and for all the reasons I've raised here, if you're doing communism, you end up aligning with woke, and woke is more pro-imperialist at this point. And look, basically, if you're doing communism in America, 99% of the people that are doing communism are pro-imperialist woke, right? They're just pandering to woke, and they might, there's a small minority of them that do support China, that do support Iran, but they're a really small minority, but even they are pandering to woke. And then there is a very, very small group of people that are internet people that are it was basically created by me, right? I mean, whoop-de-doo, but, because of me, right? Because of what I've done on this channel, because of what I did with CPI, there's a new milieu of people who've come along who have taken some of the way we talk on these streams and turned it into cringe internet bullshit like MAGA communism. And those people are just internet people, right? And they are very open about the fact that all they can do is build an internet following. I mean, they're influencers basically. And they saw what I was doing on this channel, and they saw the concepts that I was promoting, and they're not very smart. One of them's like a fucking wrestler, and one of them's just a rich kid from California, and they're not very smart, and they're emotional people who saw what I was doing and saw that I was having success, and they set up an internet thing that they can do. But there's absolutely there's not a real organization there. It's just an internet thing. Okay. It's just an internet thing. And they're very open about that. In fact, some of the people that were involved with setting it up, I talked to them and they said, all we can do is have a book club at this point. You can't build a real organization. Bullshit. You know what I mean? Tell that to the Uhuru movement. Tell that to, bullshit. But that's what they think. They think all you can do is have a book club. That's like a direct quote from somebody who was part of their discussions. They said, quote, all you can do is have a book club. Right. And so that's what they have. They have an internet book club and they have social media channels. And they don't think you can build a real organization. And some of them are so fucking stupid, they don't even understand that that's not a real organization. And it's not my job to help them understand that. I could care less what these people say. And the less I talk about them, the better, honestly, because any good thing I do, they will inevitably copy in a way that is designed to hurt CPI. So it's like anything I say, any criticism of them that I give is like giving them advice, right? And generally everything that CPI does, they take and they amplify in a cringe, stupid way, right? I was saying we need to reach out to Trump supporters because they're anti-FBI and they're anti-establishment. And they're like, oh, okay, we'll call it MAGA communism. I'm just like, oh, God. It's like anyone who's MAGA hates the word communism. Anyone who's communist hates the word MAGA. Right. And, so there's like a small, in addition to all the communist groups that are just tailing woke, there's a collection of internet people created by me, right? My Frankenstein's monster, they're not doing any real activism and they're not building a group. Right. And they, I'm not even going to go on about that. They're not building a group and they don't want to build a group. Right. That, they're just building a social media brand. They exist and they talk the way we talk a little bit. But then on top of that, though, those people are determined to own communism. They are determined we're going to be the kings of communism, right? That's what they want to be. And we have figured out, it's taken us years. This is stream 911. We have figured out that you have to move away from the word communism in order to really be anti-imperialist, in order to really fight for working families. You have to move away from communism TM. You can't be a dialectical materialist and you can't be waving the hammer sickle. And there are certain things about dialectical materialism and there are certain things about the red flag and the destructive aesthetics that communism is a toxic brand. All right. And, in America, at least around the world, it's much more complicated, but in the West, communism is, it's tainted, right? It is. So we have pivoted toward a new understanding we've pioneered called innovationism. And we're doing amazing things with that. And we don't look back, right? No looking back. We're proud of that. But I guess my point is that kind of like in the Philippines, right? How the communist group in the Philippines got backed into a corner where they just couldn't be anti-imperialist. That's what's happened in America, right? Communism in America can't be anti-imperialist. And that sucks, but in a way it doesn't, because we have to innovate. We have to pioneer new things. Look, if all that, and this is what people don't understand, if all people had to do in order to build a real mass revolutionary movement in America was open up the books of Lenin and just apply it correctly, somebody would have done that by now. All right. And that's a hard thing for certain people to hear. So there's certain people that are pulling their hair out and screaming at their screen if they're hearing me right now. I hope they're not hearing me, but they could. This is out there. The whole world can see this. But it's true, right? I'm sorry. We're in a new field, right? And the gig economy, you're going to organize an industrial union of Uber drivers. That's not going to work, right? That we're in a new era. We have to innovate. And that's why we have a new philosophy, a new synthesis called innovation. And maybe that you can look at that and say, Caleb, you're so egotistical. Okay. Don't work with me then. You can say, Caleb, you think you know more. No, I don't. I think I have to build I have a job to do and I got to do it. right? I've got to do it. We must build an illiberal movement in America, and we must build an anti-monopoly coalition, and we must build a movement in America that is against globalism, imperialism, and a pro-growth, pro-humanity movement. We got to build it. And no, we don't have the luxury of trying to maintain the LARP of 20th century communism. It's not going to work, right? It's not going to work. And no, I refuse to accept that all we can have is a goddamn book club, right? I'm sorry, a book club is not going to save our country right now. We have got to build a movement, and that's not easy. It's not easy. And if you build a movement, this is what people don't get. Building a movement doesn't mean you organize the popular kids. And building a movement doesn't mean that everybody looks sexy, right? And everything looks so cool online. That's not how building a movement works. Building a movement means you work with people who have issues. Building a movement means that when people make mistakes, you forgive them. Building a movement means that there are people you work with who annoy you and pull your hair out, but you still work with them because you have to build a movement. Building a movement is not about optics. Building a movement is about relationships. Building a movement means you support your friends. That's one thing. Building a movement means that, if the FBI comes for one anti-imperialist group, you support them no matter what. Building a movement means you cultivate relationships with people with whom you disagree to get shit done, to build demonstrations, to build movement infrastructure. Building a movement means it's very, very different than being cool on the internet. It's just one and the other are not the same. And, there's no way you can build a movement without getting your hands dirty. And we live in a time where it's very hard to organize because of the toxic atomization. The reason we wrote the Khrushchevism book is because we have a culture where everyone is trained to just, it's a scam, it's phony, it's a cookbook. That's our culture right now. All right, there's a million videos all over YouTube about how everything's a scam, everything's a fraud. Don't fall for it. Well, I'm sorry, you got to join something. You got to be part of something if you're going to. And look, we know where things are headed. All right. Strategic equilibrium is coming closer every day. At some point, Noah is building the ark, and he's building the ark, and he's nailing on the ark. And people say, Noah, what are you doing building a giant ship in this neighborhood, right? There's no ocean around here. You're a crazy man building your ark. And Noah just keeps building his ark. And Noah just keeps building his ark. And then the flood water, and then the rain starts coming. And it just keeps coming, and it just keeps coming. And then the flood waters start rising. And then everybody knows why Noah was building his ark. That's the time we're heading towards, right? Right now, it's really, really hard to build an organization. It is really, really hard to build an organization because we have a culture that is obsessively inoculating people against building an organization. Netflix and everything on social media is telling people, don't join a group, don't join a group, don't join a group, don't join an organization, don't believe in a religion, don't fight for anything. No, don't do that. Don't do that. Just be yourself, be an individual, be internet famous. That's what our culture is screaming at us. Stay home and watch Netflix, be obsessed with yourself, don't collective. That's our culture right now. It's like amped up. Why? Why is our culture doing that? Why is the intelligence apparatus obsessively inoculating people against building an organization? Why? Because they know that the floodwaters are coming. And the only way you're going to survive when the floodwaters come is to get in an ark. Why did Uhuru get raided by the FBI and nobody else? They didn't raid any other organization. They went after an individual, Scott Ritter. Why did Uhuru get raided and dragged into federal court? Because they're building an ark. That's why. They've got buildings. They've got food programs, organic food programs. They're doing it. They're building an ark. That's what they're scared of. Because when the flood comes, those arks are going to be really fucking important. When the floodwaters come, the ark is going to be really fucking important. When the floodwater comes, your Twitter feed is not going to matter. When the floodwaters come, your Facebook and your Instagram is not going to matter. When the floodwaters come, when the waters start rising, all that's going to matter is an ark. That's what's going to matter. And that's why they went after Uhuru, because Uhuru has built at least the skeleton or the rudiments of an ark. And that's what we need to be building right now. We need to be building an ark. And no, a book club is not a book club is not an ark, right? A book club is not an ark. We need to be building an ark right now. The floodwaters are coming. 3 years ago in Chicago, I gave a speech and I said, I made this very analogy and I stick with it. We've got to build an ark. We've got to build an ark, right? And an ark is what matters. An ark is what matters, and that's what we're building. And you can't build an ark and be famous on the internet, and you can't build an ark and be sexy all the time, and you can't build an ark and only work with people that look cool, and you can't build an ark and only work with people who don't get on your nerves. Building an ark is a messy business, right? You got to have a drill, you got to have a hammer, you got to have a saw, you got to have lots of wood. Building an ark is a messy business, and it's not always, made for prime time. And people get their feelings hurt when you build an ark. People get their toes stepped on when you build an ark. And people, you can't keep everybody happy when you're building an ark. And you get your hands dirty. And it takes a lot of wood. And the payoff is not always there because the floodwaters don't come, but that's what we're doing. We're building an ark. We're building an ark. We're building an ark. If I just wanted to be internet famous, things would be very different. I don't want to be internet famous. I want to build an ark. And that has always been my position. I've always understood that. We're building an ark and the floodwaters are coming. And when the floodwaters come, our ark is going to be important. And I pray and I hope that whatever we build is enough that we can survive the storm and get the work done that needs to be done. Right? That's what I hope for. And if you don't believe the floodwaters are coming, fine. Hey, that's on you. You don't have to. And if you would rather be entertained by somebody else on the internet, by all means do it. I'm not pandering to the crowd. I'm not trying to be internet famous. I'm building an ark. I'm building an ark. So anyhow, I think we have 2 Rumble rants. All right. Oh, three Rumble rants. So the first Rumble rant is on Michael Hudson's explanation on deindustrialization. Why does the job market suck for those of us under 25? Well, I understand that Michael Hudson explains the tendency of the falling rate of profit, that they're constantly devaluing the labor of human beings with labor replacing technology, getting rid of jobs straight up, or at the same time, de-skilling jobs so workers are easier to replace. And that this is the built-in problem of capitalism. And this is what Marx wrote about. And this is what I always talk about on my streams. No one ever talks about this. The tendency of the falling rate of profit, or the tendency of the rate of profit to fall, the value crisis, the problem of overproduction. There are 3 books that you can read that will explain to you why the job market sucks for people your age. High Tech, Low Pay by Sam Marcy. The Future is Up to Us by Nelson Puri. Low Wage Capitalism by Fred Goldstein. Read those 3 books and you will understand, or just go read What is Innovationism on our website. You'll get a much shorter. This is the built-in problem that in the capitalist mode of production, the more efficient you make production, the poorer people get. No, it's not an easy one-word explanation, billionaires, Chris. It's not that simple, right? How is that an answer? Some people are rich, and that's why. No, Chris, yes, I understand that the billionaires get rich by making other people poor, but that's not an answer. So, it's not an answer. No, that is not an answer. I'm sorry. Some people being rich doesn't explain it. There's something to do with how production is organized. That we have a system where self-driving cars would be a bad thing because millions of people would be out of work. Why does that make sense? The chore called driving being gotten rid of would lead to human labor power being more productive than ever before, but yet it would make people poor. It's not that simple. Wealth existing is not the cause of the problem. The problem is the capitalist mode of production. The problem is profits in command. The problem is we don't have an economy that functions rationally. That's the problem. Okay? Right? And Chris, when you put it that way, you just sound like you're anti-wealth. That's what it sounds like to most people. You think wealth is bad, right? Right? And I know that's not what you're saying, Chris, but that's how it sounds to most people, right? Most people hear that. If you think the problem is just billionaires, you're saying, oh, the problem is some people having money. Well, that's not the problem. The problem is our economy is operating in a way that it serves the wealth of private owners. And those private owners maximize their wealth through automation. And the fewer people they hire, the more profit they get. And the ability of the worker to buy back what he produces is constantly decreasing. And the rate of profit that they make on every item they sell is constantly going down. And we have a problem in this system that has never existed that would have been an absurdity. Right? In the Communist Manifesto, Marx writes about a problem that in previous epochs would have seemed an absurdity. The problem of overproduction, people becoming homeless because there are too many houses, people becoming hungry because there is too much food. That is the irrationality of the capitalist market. Right? That's the problem. And Chris, it's okay. It's okay. We're all learning, right? We're all learning. Okay, Chris, and I'm just telling you, though, that there's a reason we have to be innovationists, is we can't just say billionaires are the problem, because that makes it sound like we're anti-wealth. And working people want to have more wealth. Wealth is not bad. Exploitation is bad. The anarchy of production is bad, right? And Chris, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're here to hear this. So please, Chris, don't. I know somebody was just insulting you and they shouldn't have been doing that, right? They shouldn't have been doing that because this is a process. You learn by arguing. You learn by disagreeing, right? It's dialectic, right? I mean, so it's okay. It's okay to have this kind of back and forth. But no, the problem is not billionaires. The problem is the chaos of the market, the anarchy of production. That's all, Chris. And I apologize if I got a little too fired up there, but these are concepts. Again, if you really want to learn this stuff, low wage capitalism, future is up to us, high tech, low pay, or read our stuff. Read What is Innovationism, right? Or read Fascism and Social Revolution by R. Palm Dutt. That's a very good book about the same concept. So there you go. All right. Okay. All right. There you go. All right. So, Chris, I'm not talking down to you. I'm explaining my perspective and why I think that my perspective is better, right? And this is the thing. It's, you can disagree with me if you want. I'm just telling you that we have to fight for these bigger concepts, right? And that, that's all I'm saying, right? And you shouldn't be hurt by me, saying it, right? And I'm saying that if you frame things up that way, right? Just, don't be sensitive. We're here to learn. All right. All right. So what's the next question? Okay. All right. I personally know Zohran from my time living in NYC. Wow. Dang. Okay. And I appreciate the nuanced take on his campaign positions, family background, and reputation of Zionist imperialist critique. Thank you. Wow. I'm impressed. So somebody who actually knows Zohran says I'm right. Well, damn. I am proud of myself. Well, there you go. Thank you, Deha. I appreciate that. And I'm really glad to hear that. So somebody take that and put it in your pipe and smoke it. Somebody who actually knows Zohran, who knows him personally from his activism in New York City, says that my analysis is correct. Thank you, Deha. I will put that on my shelf of metals. Thank you. Medals, not medals. Metals, but medals. So there we go. Thank you, Deha. I appreciate it. Looking forward to hanging out with you in July. When Khrushchev made his dishonest speech in 1956, was attacking the cult of personality uniquely tailored to Americans? No, it wasn't. It was tapping into certain psychological tropes that are already in a lot of communists. A lot of people become communists because they want to kill their dad, right? And that's, that's the French Revolution. Cut off the king's head. A lot of people become communists because they have Oedipal issues. And Khrushchev was very, very nervous that he was having to fill the shoes of a giant, Stalin. And he also wanted to make a deal with the U.S. imperialists. So he decided to kill everybody's dad, to cut off the head of his dad, to cut off the dad of the country. Stalin was the dad of the Soviet Union. He was the father figure who led the country through the nightmare of World War II, who helped the country industrialize, etc. And Khrushchev wanted to accommodate with U.S. imperialism. And he also knew that a lot of communists have Oedipal issues, right? A lot of people become communist revolutionaries because they want to kill the king, they want to kill God, they want to kill their dad, right? That's part of the 1800s and 20th century leftist red flag aesthetic, right? The red flag is the flag of blood. It's the flag of rage and anger and sexual passion. And, communism as a movement, kind of tailors itself towards, people that have a very extreme Oedipal and libidinal issue, right? They really want libidinal release and they really want to kill their fathers. So Khrushchev, for his own selfish reasons, because he wanted to accommodate with U.S. imperialism, because he wanted to, secure his own position, and he was competing with like one of the greatest, the top statesmen in world history, he decided that he was going to, tap into people's Oedipal issues. And he painted an Oedipal picture, right? Of, the picture that he painted of Stalin is it's the portrait of a tyrant. It's the portrait of a bully, of a narcissist. It's the portrait that he paints, like beyond the facts, right? He paints a picture of Stalin that is a caricature that people have in their minds of a tyrannical father, a tyrannical king, and it taps into something that is widespread among leftists. They want to cut the king's head off, right? And he was smart. That's how a lot of leftists think. And Khrushchev was a lifelong communist. Khrushchev even supported Trotsky. Did you know that? Khrushchev was a Trotskyite at one point. He apologized, but he was a Trotskyite. And he knew how communists think. And so to people that are attracted to communism, to get up and give a speech against the evil, self-serving king who's suppressing you, and to say, oh, that's that father of the country. He wasn't a good guy. He was actually a self-serving tyrant. A lot of communists would be taken in by that because it fed into the underlying psychological issues. And yeah, it helped him in the short term, but it destroyed the global communist movement. It basically destroyed the global communist movement. And what Stalin spent his entire life doing was moving communism away from the deviant appeal. Right? Stalin spent his entire life realizing we can't be Trotskyites. We can't be calling for permanent revolution. We need to love our homeland. We need to bring back the Russian Orthodox Church. We need to appeal to what's the best in people. We need to create a spirit of selflessness and community. Stalin was moving away from the red flag, guillotine left aesthetic and moving communism in a city builder direction. And he did. That's how Stalin was able to do what he did. And maybe Stalin didn't even want to do it, but he had to. It was out of necessity. He moved communism in a different psychological direction. And because of that, he got a lot done. But then Khrushchev, he threw a hand grenade in the whole thing. So that's my take. Go read my book on Khrushchev. My book on Khrushchevism, I must say, Kinkel really liked it, right? And that's true. Kinkel really liked the book. The whole audio book is here on YouTube, so you could just listen to it. That book, Khrushchevism, is it is the culmination of years of study. It's got so much important stuff in it. I am so proud that I wrote that book. And honestly, it is, if you want to understand what CPI is doing and why what we're doing is so important, go read the Khrushchevism book. It's really my, I'm really proud that I wrote it. I really want people to read it. If you want to understand what we're doing, go read Khrushchevism or listen to the audiobook. It's free here on the YouTube channel. I have playlists, audiobook, you can listen to it. So there you go. One thing that I will say is my work is informed by activism. I'm not just writing on an ivory tower. The way that I get the inspiration to write and pioneer these new concepts like I do is through building a group. It's through the actual practice of building an organization that I develop the understanding that I have, right? I wrote my book about Luigi Mangione, my Luigi Mangione book, the killing of Brian Thompson and the dangers of years of lead. All of this is informed by practice. Knowledge comes from correct practical experience, not from having a book club, not from building a social media brand. It comes from working with people to try and get shit done. That's where, thank you, Kinkle. That's where my insights come from. They come from correct practical experience, right? And that's why I'm building an organization. You learn by doing. That's a really big point in Mao Zedong thought, right? Mao was always like, if you want to learn, go to the countryside. If you want to learn, organize. And that is more true than anything. So knowledge comes from correct practical experience. And I don't expect, if you're not involved in building a movement, my work might not speak to you. You might be very confused, right? You say, Caleb, you wrote a whole book called Khrushchevism. The first chapter is a big defense of Stalin. And then the rest of the book is about Trotskyite groups and how the CIA broke them apart. That doesn't make any sense. Well, it makes sense if you're trying to build a movement, right? I mean, right? I mean, it's like if you're not involved in trying to build a group, and if this is just an intellectual debate, you might be like, this book doesn't make any sense. But it makes sense if you're involved in trying to build a group, right? The first chapter is about how Khrushchev's secret speech was bullshit, and Stalin accomplished a huge amount and built a real effective global mass movement. And the next sections of the book are about how the mindset that Khrushchev used to destroy that mass movement, the Khrushchevist mindset rooted in the negative side of leftism, the Oedipus complex, the red flag, the vengeance, that was used to take apart various anti-imperialist communist groups. And wokeism is part of that. Wokeism is the descendant of that. And that's what causes us to have to enter new territory, because what Stalin was doing throughout his life was moving communism away from the destructive left aesthetic. Stalin was trying to move away from the spirit of the guillotine. Right? Stalin was trying to move away from the French Revolution. He was trying to move away from, the stuff Mao did in the Cultural Revolution, which was very bad. Mao was a great leader in many ways, but that Cultural Revolution, that was pretty evil. It was pretty awful. It was bad. Stalin was trying to move communism away from a destructive, hateful mindset. He was trying to move communism to be a city builder movement because it had to. And Reuben Osborne understands that in his writing, and that Khrushchevism was using this kind of poison pill, the destructive mindset, right? This is Reuben Osborne. I really hope we can republish his 2 books soon after the conference. Maybe, after the conference, maybe I'll have some time to breathe and I can finish, because they're in the public domain. They're not copyrighted. Maybe I can finish the layout of those 2 books, but Reuben Osborne, Freud and Marx, A Dialectical Study, and Psychology of Reaction, the thesis that he comes to in both books is basically this. Communism encourages people to do good things, build labor unions, fight for civil rights, stand with the oppressed, but it generally recruits people on the basis of deviant and unhealthy emotions. Whereas fascism motivates people to do bad things, like have big wars and commit genocide and be racist, but it appeals to their healthy emotions, their love of country, their love of community, etc. And Stalin realized this. And over the course of the 1920s and 30s, Soviet communism started moving toward appealing to people's healthier emotions. And the reason communist governments around the world don't see eye to eye with leftists is because they're appealing to people's healthy emotions. And Marxism and communism generally appeals to people's negative emotions, right? And that's, and wokeism is just appealing to those negative emotions without any understanding of imperialism or leftist economics at all, right? But anyhow, folks, it's been a good night. I'm sorry I went off on some people in the chat tonight. I mean, sometimes you have to make a point, and I mean, I want people to engage, and honestly, that's how you get people to engage. You have to react to people in the chat a little bit, in order to engage. That's what you got to do. So, but you know what? I think we've had a great stream tonight. We've gone in many, many interesting directions. Tomorrow, I'm going to be having meetings and doing all kinds of important stuff. And, but we're getting a lot done. And pretty soon I'll be in Chicago and we'll be moving mountains. And shout out to everyone. Thank you to everyone who has donated to the CPI convention. Thank you to everyone who has, everyone who's coming, everyone's participating, everyone who's building. Thank you. One thing I must say is if you're doing real organizing, you can't thank people enough, right? You can't acknowledge people enough. You can't celebrate what the good things people do enough, right? There's not enough celebrating people for what they do well, right? And I aim to do a lot more of that with CPI. So there we go. All right. Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to put on the closing music. Please send us a donation for the convention if you can. We've gotten a lot of good donations so far, but we got to stay ahead. We got to stay ahead because the expenses are, it's always more expensive to do one of these things than I thought. But thank you, everybody. Thank you, thank you, thank you. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.